So welcome to day 2 of creating your first game with Marmalade. Today we're going to be talking very much around C++, so we hope you're going to enjoy the course. But here, first of all, let's introduce ourselves.
So my name is James Wintram. I'm director of Lemon Moose Games, which is a company based in the northeast of England. We focus primarily on mobile titles, and I have a lot of experience with Marmalade, Unity 3D, and languages like C++, C#, and Python.
So I'm Lee Stott. I'm a technical evangelist in Microsoft. I'm focused on gaming, cloud and academia in the UK. I've got 4 years of gaming experience, been a technical editor on a number of different publications, and that's my blog address if you want to check out what we've been up to recently. So let's look at the course topics today. We're talking about C++ and creating your first Marmalade game. We'll start off with an intro and talk about the Marmalade and the overview of what Marmalade is and how it works. We'll then talk about how to build the game and the gameplay. We'll then go into look at some cloud services, so how you can add cloud services into your game. We'll then talk about monetization. We'll talk about how to create Marmalade extensions, so adding extra functionality and services into your games. And then finish with packaging and finishing touches for building your game specifically for Windows Phone and Windows 8. So let's set some expectations. We're really looking at beginner, intermediate and advanced C++ developers for this session. Anybody who's got any experience of C++, in terms of suggested prerequisites, we're saying, you should have done at least some Marmalade tutorials, you should have some C++ knowledge, and you should definitely be thinking about doing the MVA introduction to C++ and DirectX game development. So please undertake those courses, and we hope you have a great experience on this one. First of all, Microsoft MVA is a great community to join. We've got over 2 million registered users. And again, you can earn points by undertaking these courses. So you can see we've got a dedicated code for this course. So please do use the code and please complete it and get your additional training points. So let's look at what Microsoft and Marmalade's investment in indie game devs out there today. Tell us a bit about...
Yeah, so we've used that as being a small company that fits the criteria. We've taken advantage and we've got loads of really cool software that probably would have cost tens of thousands, if we'd had to pay for it. We've used, the Azure time you get as a BizSpark customer, and it's, really helped us along.
So Microsoft BizSpark is really our startup program for any new startups. The key requirement is that you're under 5 years old and you're under $1 million of turnover. And this is available to any startup across the world. And as James says, you get access to Visual Studio, all our developer tools, including cloud services. So it allows you to get building and using those services to get your business started, because we know software is one of the biggest costs you face. In terms of Marmalade, Marmalade have got some specific offers as well. So first of all, you can get started with Marmalade for free. So anybody who isn't a Marmalade user, if you just head to the Marmalade site, you can download Marmalade. And they do have a dedicated Windows site which has all the resources, documentation, tutorials and videos to help you get started to go along with this module. And again, we want you to bring your games to Windows. So we advise you to check often and look at what offers are available on both those sites, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the day. So let's look at Module 1. Module 1 is about an intro and an overview to what Marmalade is. So let's start with looking at what these module overview is. So first of all, we'll talk about what Marmalade is. We'll introduce you to the Marmalade Hub, the configuration and setup. We'll then look at deploying a simple application through Visual Studio and accessing resources and help. So an introduction to the Marmalade Hub. The Marmalade is really a gaming system, isn't it, James? Yeah. So it's a proper IDE gaming service. It's not a graphical user interface.
Yeah, no, there's multiple parts to it. You've got the foundation layer, which is the cross-platform framework. And on top of that, there's other systems that are built, such as Marmalade Quick or the HTML5 stuff, or you can build stuff in C++ that sits directly on top of that platform.
So in terms of developers, the key thing about Marmalade is it's not a graphical design program. It's not like Unity. It's not like GameMaker. It's not like Construct 2. It's a pure IDE. It's an IDE which is you have to literally code either via Visual Studio or via another IDE. Yeah. So big benefits for Visual Studio is it's integrated. So you have the source is easy accessible via the open project, and it's a great way to get started. One of the things I need to call out, it's not an image manipulation tool. So it's not like Photoshop or GIMP. You will need to use Photoshop or GIMP to produce those games and that content for your games. So let's look at some of the features and capabilities of Marmalade. As we said, Marmalade is AAA quality.
Yeah.
So, you've got people like Activision,
Yeah.
EA. Can you name any good Activision games out there which have used Marmalade?
You've got the Blur Overdrive, which is available on, I can't remember what platform, same as the Activision Decathlon. So they're pretty high-end 3D games.
And they've all been produced in Marmalade. So again, Marmalade again has its own studio.
Yeah.
And they use a C++ version of Marmalade to produce games directly for Marmalade Studio. Again, programming-wise, you can use C++, you can use Lua, HTML5, JavaScript, and Objective-C. So again, it's about taking those skills you already know and bringing them to the platform. One of the key caveats with Marmalade is OpenGL SES support, and that Windows only supports DirectX. So there is a layer which Marmalade implements to allow the conversion of OpenGL to DirectX. And that's a pretty important thing, isn't it, James, in terms of getting to the Windows platform?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest obstacles, say, if you've got a code base that's written in C++ for iOS or Android, that's going to use OpenGLES as its graphical API. So converting that to DirectX can often mean, vast amounts of work relative to, how much work went into the game originally. So having that stuff translated
automatically for you,
is, and I don't think there's much of a performance drop at all, so it's not like you're going to lose any frame rate or anything. It's pretty good. So
yes, that's one of the key things about Marmalade, isn't it? In the whole OpenGLES translation, is that it's a middle layer, but the overhead is very, very minimal.
Yeah, I believe it's using the Angle project, which does the actual translations.
Yeah. So. Excellent. Again, you've got physics support with BoxTD, but you've got more physics engines in terms of C++ libraries out there as well.
I think's one, and you can even use 3D engines such as Bullet Physics and Newton Dynamics.
So again, it's about taking those resources and tools you already know,
it's a choice, isn't it?
And using the right tool for the right job. So this is the construct of Marmalade in terms of the architecture piece. As James literally said earlier on, it's about the CPU, then sitting on the Marmalade systems with the ability of extensions, and then the middleware that you want to use, and then your application code.
Yeah.
So it gives you that flexibility to be able to expand and grow your service, your game engine as such. Again, it allows you to create some great games, and the big advantage of C and C++ is it's completely open.
Yeah.
So it allows you to use any resource you can find on the web,
yeah.
any resources that are available in a GitHub repository, so you can really start to grow your games. In terms of the Marmalade C++ stack, one of the big advantages is it's cross-platform.
Yeah.
As you said before, you can build an OpenGLES is supported on the majority of the platforms, but the actual interface to DirectX is very minimal, and it's something as a developer you don't need to be concerned about.
No.
Again, you've got access to the native platform features. So in terms of Windows, we've got some great access, great features there, which are universal across all devices. So Compass,
you can even do
Accelerometer.
it through C# as well. You don't have to write it to the native platform interaction.
Exactly,
C#, so.
And that's one of the big benefits of the Visual Studio integration is you can actually, do cross-tool, cross-platform development, So you can do cross-language development. So you can have a solution that has some C# in it, some C++ in it, potentially even some Lua in it, which we touched on day one.
Yeah.
Again, one of the other features is access to the Marmalade out-of-box features such as SQLite. Again, the whole packaging and debugging ability to actually, use a single IDE. It's a great time saver. Again, what's really important is that whole extension, and we've got a dedicated model on the application extensions, haven't we? And we'll go into more detail about how to use the EDK. And that's a great opportunity for developers.
And that's what I was saying. That's how you can use the C# and interact with the Windows APIs directly.
And we've got some great demos there where we're using third-party services and building like the cloud service solution.
Yeah. And obviously with Visual Studio, you can use cool things like Visual Assist. It's one of my favourite tools for accelerating development. So.
And you can use Visual Studio Online, which we'll touch on in a bit. So, key things for getting started with Marmalade is you do need a Windows 8.1 license. So if you're a BizSpark customer, completely free. If you're a DreamSpark customer, completely free because all students get access. Again, if you don't have access to Windows 8, you can download the trial edition. You will need Visual Studio, and you will need a Visual Studio for Windows Store. Again, there's a link on the slide deck. And again, go to the resources, so madewithmarmalade.com. Lots and lots of resources and information there. And you can download and install Marmalade completely free.
And I
which
think
is
you
a
made
big
the
benefit.
point that the Windows 8.1 needs to be Pro and 64-bit.
Yes, so Windows 8.1 needs to be Pro, it needs to be 64-bit, and you will need a minimum of 2 gig of memory to run that version. The reasons for that is purely because we have to run the Windows emulator for Windows 8 and the Windows simulator for Windows Phone, and they require Hyper-V, so your machine has to support SLAT. So that's a key point that, if you want to run any of those emulators or simulators, a Hyper-V is required. So in terms of Marmalade and C++ guides,
pretty good ones out there.
There's some great ones out there. So Marmalade have got some really great ones on the doc site. There's lots of third-party ones and lots of guidance in terms of those API details, isn't there? So again, we've got a set of resources there for you to get started, for you to look at what is available. Again, the docs are being updated all the time. And again, think about those community-based projects. So Marmalade have their own GitHub repository. And feel free to get involved in some of those actual Git repositories and create some forks and build some solutions.
And, be an open source contributor.
And it looks great for you as developers. So let's quickly touch on what's new in Visual Studio 2013. From a game development perspective, there's some really nice new features, and I want to just quickly focus on those. So big things for us has been graphics tooling improvements in Visual Studio. And the big key one for us is really about those graphics diagnostics. If anybody's used Windows Pix in the past, that's now changed with the graphics diagnostic tool. Again, that allows you to debug your graphics, the performance, enhancements, and really see where those performance issues are in the C++ code you're writing. Again, Visual Studio is free if you want the Express version. And again, we've enhanced what is available in the Express edition. So again, think about the opportunity there of using Visual Studio. Another key thing that we're looking at is Visual Studio Online. So Visual Studio Online is a great way of you, as an indie developer or a small studio, allowing all the people in your team to have access to source control, project management documentation, a single build, burn rate, great new features, stakeholder management, where you can actually share your resources with a third party so that they can see or understand where you are as a development team. So again, visualstudio.com is a great resource. Key things I want to call out, it's free for 5 users. It has unlimited team and private groups. So this is an ability for you as a team, and I know you use it, Visual Studio. It's a great tool to get working. Again, continuous integration. It's got full build services, load testing, and again, MSDN subscribers. So if you're a BizSpark subscriber, you get an MSDN subscription, can join completely for free with an unlimited number.
So all those tools there to help you build a better, higher quality product, aren't they? The continuous integration, the load testing, means that when you get something out there, it's going to work, well.
It's going to work well, it's going to be tested, you're going to have diagnosed it, and again, as a team, you're working from a single repository. It's not like you're sending USB keys or all acts in a file share on a network. You've got some code repository, which is a great resource. So this is the Marmalade Hub. The Marmalade Hub, as we said in Module 1, is very simplistic. Again, we've got options for C++, Quick, and Marmalade Web. But today we're going to focus purely on the C++ aspect, and we expect you to follow along and understand where we're going, which is great. So C++ and Marmalade, why should you think about using C++? What are the big factors?
I think there's a lot of experience in C++, a lot of experienced C++ programmers, a lot of libraries out there that are written in C++. Also, there's if you feel that you want to use something like Marmalade and you think, well, they're great, that can do our cross-platform stuff, but you're a bit concerned, I don't want vendor lock-in, or I might need to move to another platform.
So it's that whole portability.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So OpenGLES or an OpenGL very similar, and they're open standards and they work across platforms and stuff. And depending on how you architect your code as well, it should be very easy to leverage Marmalade's cross-platform layer and sort of build on top of that. But also you can go much further and integrate completely with Marmalade's middleware APIs and stuff and get great performance out of it as well.
So again, it's like third-party libraries, performance. So everything we've stated on this deck is the key things, from a developer's perspective. These are the 5 key aspects of being a great game developer, isn't it? You want to get to as many platforms as possible. So, code reuse is key. You want the ability to be able to easily deploy. You want the performance. You don't want that overhead of, not knowing how to do DirectX, for example. And again, it's about that familiarity. It's using one tool. You don't want to learn 8 different tools to do the job. And, today we live in a mobile society. Everybody has mobiles. Everyone has different mobiles. Everyone changes their mobile. So again, you've got to think about producing games for every platform. You have a launch date and you want to be as many eyeballs as possible. So if you can use a middleware framework or a tool set, you should be publishing to everything. So let's talk a bit about the loader and the S3E binary system, which Marmalade uses, because that, we touched on it on day one about this is being, the SE3 is the key fundamental of being able to join services or functionality into your games and services.
Yeah, so I mean the S3E layer is the bottom layer in the Marmalade stack, and that's that handles all the interaction with whatever platform you're working on and provides a sort of unified interface for your code to interact with. So the loader system is a piece of code that Marmalade writes, and your game is like a game binary. So in Windows, for example, it leverages DLL files, although they rename them to I can't remember what they renamed them to, but they're DLL files with a different name. And essentially, the Marmalade loader will load that up as a DLL and then run it. But that same mechanism is used on all the other platforms as well. So it's a unified mechanism of a loader and a binary. And that allows it to sort of load your program and keep it isolated
and again that gives you that portability option because it's loading that loader for every single platform, isn't it? So again, a great resource. So let's look at deploying a simple application using Marmalade C++. Key considerations for the Windows platform is around hardware. So number one is as we said earlier, DirectX is supported. Everything that we do is uses Direct 3D. Again, when you're building with Marmalade, you need to set that to level 9.1 and above. We recommend 9.3 is sort of being the best standard. Again, two big takeaways is the shader model. So look at shader level 2 and a max texture size of 4096. Again, that's just ensuring that the performance is there. And again, if you're thinking about how Marmalade works, is don't get too caught up on the OpenGLES and DirectX issues. Marmalade will deal with that. So just don't consider yourself, don't be too over concerned with trying to understand what Direct is and Direct 3D and OpenGLES, etc. So let's look at the device resolutions for Windows Phone. So Windows Phone really comes in 4 different variants. We have the 480 by 800, so the WVGA. We have the 768 by 1280, which is the WXGA. And then we have the new HD devices, so the 720p and the 1080p. Again, what's really interesting about this in C++ is you can query the devices to see what actual resolution they are, so what the end user has, and more importantly then provide content that is most appropriate to their device. So that's a great feature for game developers, isn't it, today? So let's look at what the actual memory allocations are. So Windows Phone comes in really 2 variants. It comes in a low spec device, which are our most popular devices, and that's really because of cost. So for example, in the UK you can buy a Windows Phone for around £30. In the US around $60 now for a Windows Phone. So they are our high volume sellers, and they're 512 meg of memory. So again, thinking about when you are building your games, performance and optimization, and the great updates that are now provided in Visual Studio Update 3 really allow you to get the best performance out of your games.
And the advantage of C++ is you are going to be writing, or you do have the ability to write very high performance code, which will run very nicely on the lower end devices.
And that's one of the big benefits of that native development environment, isn't it? You are writing native code as such.
Sure,
so you can get the maximum performance out of the tin that you're writing to. So let's look at some of the deployment considerations then for building for Windows 8 and 8.1. graphics are key. We are running on PC devices, so again, we expect you to be building to that, to the DirectX level of 9.1 as a minimum. Again, think about how we have 2 different SKUs. So we have the Intel devices and the AMD devices running x86, and we also have the ARM devices, so like things like the Surface RT. And that's where you need to start considering when you're building in C++ actual binaries for each, actual packages for each of those architectural solutions. So you will have to build for both x86 and for ARM as native solutions. And that's the key thing Marmalade actually offers you, is that ability to build to those platforms very, very simply. Again, what we've been saying about the whole OpenGL, OpenES is don't be too concerned about OpenGLES to Direct 3D to DirectX, is that Marmalade actually handles all that for you as a developer. It wraps that solution for you. So again, don't feel you have to know too much detail around this. from your perspective, it's about getting to the maximum number of platforms in the shortest time possible using maximum code reuse. So again, look at the opportunity there. So let's look at a quick demo in terms of exploring the Marmalade Hub for C++. So if I switch to my Marmalade Hub, and when I open my Marmalade Hub, I actually have these options. So I've got Marmalade C++, Marmalade Quick for Lua, and Marmalade Web. Today we're going to be focusing purely on C++, and in the previous sessions we've focused on Marmalade Quick for day one. So in C++, again, we have a very similar screen. We have a number of different tutorials that are available. So again, under the tutorials, we can work through building our first Marmalade C++ game, and that's split into 7 tutorials which take you through a whole physics-based game. Again, teaching the basics, so we advise everybody who's new to C++ to undertake that to get a good grounding of what the game is around. Again, we have the opportunity of all the examples. So there's lots and lots of different examples available in the Marmalade Hub, from the tutorials to graphics to specific on games, things on networking, user interfaces. Again, we've got full games in here. So a great example is the Carts. So Carts is is actually what it is. It's a kart driving game, but it's all built in C++, and it allows you to go through building the entire game and have a fully working game at the end of it.
You
so
can see every aspect that's gone into building it and explore. You can see how again the Marmalade guys have used Marmalade to build the game. So.
And again, that comes back to Marmalade being both a middleware framework provider and platform provider, as well as being a studio.
Yeah,
so
because they actually build games.
They're building games and publishing games.
Well,
So So if you check out any of the stores, you'll see games there from Marmalade. Again, if we look at the documentation side, there's so much documentation available, and this is all stored on docs.marmalade.com. Again, fantastic resource. So if you do want to learn about C++ from a very, if you're a beginner all the way through to an advanced, lots and lots of detail here on C++, going all the way into what the libraries are currently in Marmalade, all the way through to, how to add ARM variants and support. So again, never feel afraid of not having enough resources. There's so much documentation and resources available, plus videos, etc. Just absorb the content and use that for the best. So we go back to the presentation. So what we're going to do now is just talk about accessing resources and help. There's various different ways of doing that. So key things are really from a Marmalade perspective, there's a Marmalade Hub. There's a dedicated website for Windows developers at marmalade.com/Windows. There's a community answers and Marmalade knowledge base, and there's lots of Marmalade documentation. And again, if you're a licensed user, so if you've got anything above an indie license, you also get a support agent, so you can ring up the support teams and actually ask them specific questions around your current game, any APIs that you're having issues with. So again, it's a great support network. So I'm going to pass over to James while he does a demo on accessing resources directly on Marmalade.
Okay, so I've got the Marmalade Hub open here, and I'm going to go into the Marmalade C++ section, and you'll see when I've got this open up, you've got all the projects here, you've got a bit of help explaining what you can do, but at the bottom here, slightly hard to see on my monitor, you've got tutorial codes, examples, and help and documentation that will always be available. So if I click on the tutorial code and examples, that'll bring up this list that we saw earlier of all the various things that you can look at and all the projects that are available to check out and see, examples of how specific stuff is done. So if we go back to the Your Marmalade Projects page, we can then click on the help and documentation, which will open up a web browser to the docs.madewithmarmalade.com page. And on this page you can see all the description of the help there and all the different topics that are aligned by the technology they've got, such as Quick, Juice, Web, and C++. If we open up the C++ one and the platform one, so we're looking at C++ today. So here's the starting point you probably want to look at if you're going to get into C++. We've got API guides on the side here with a platform abstraction layer, which we've discussed. This is their bottom platform that abstracts all the devices away from you. And then a separate section for all of their middleware. So this is the stuff that is quite Marmalade specific. So, drawing libraries and other kind of graphics libraries that are made available to you. So the platform guides they have include Windows Phone platform guides and Windows Store platform guides. And under these sections, you have everything that you'll need to know when developing the apps and games for the Windows Store. and phone. So I suggest you give that a check out and have a read through there and make yourself familiar. One key thing with the Marmalade Hub as well is you'll notice we've got the licensing thing here, and for the hub to actually work, you need to be connected to the internet periodically for it to carry out its license checks, and also to access the help, because obviously
all the help's online via
all the
web
help's
resources
online.
now. So thanks. So what we'll do now is we'll step back into the presentation. So again, just to stress those key resources, we've got madewithmarmalade.com, we've got madewithmarmalade.com/Windows, the dedicated Windows section. Again, there's some great documentation on there, which I think you've been involved in, James, in terms of writing porting guides.
Yeah.
So we have dedicated porting guides for Windows Phone, Windows 8 and for C++. So again, you can get really involved in stepping through these processes. And then you've got the Docs with Marmalade site that James has just shown you, so lots of resources. And again, if you're interested in Visual Studio, head to visualstudio.com, you can download Update 3, and you can also create your online account, which can get started with Visual Studio Online. So as a quick module review, we've done a quick overview of Marmalade. We've talked about the Marmalade Hub configuration and setup. We've talked about deploying a simple application through Visual Studio and what the actual considerations you need to consider. And in the next session, we'll actually deploy our game and talk about how it actually works. And then we've talked about how to access those key resources and help. So we hope you've enjoyed Module 1 and join us for Module 2 later. So welcome back to the MVA, creating your first Marmalade game with C++. So we're on to Module 2 now. So in terms of modules, we've done Module 1, which was the introduction and overview of Marmalade. Module 2, we're going to be talking about building the gameplay. In Module 3, we're going to be talking about cloud services. In Module 4, monetization. In Module 5, creating Marmalade extensions. And Module 6 is packaging and finishing touches. So Module 2, building the gameplay. In this module, we're going to really focus upon what is in the game in terms of the code, the different scenes, the different aspects, and more importantly, how you actually can get into building that game if you're new to C++. So in terms of an overview, we're going to be talking about what we're going to be building. We're going to be building a game with Marmalade C++, deploying the game to a device, and then looking at where you can get the source code. So all the source code for today's examples are on the GitHub repository here, so please feel free to download and follow along as we're going through the program. So first of all, welcome to what we're going to be building. So James, give us a bit of background about the game we're going to be building today.
So we're going to be recreating probably the earliest computer game in existence called Pong.
Oh, I remember that on the Atari 2600.
Yeah, I'm not that old.
But, yeah, right.
No, I was a Mega Drive man. But anyway, it's going to be called Turbo Pong because everything's better with turbo in front of it. And we're going to have leaderboards, we're going to have ads, and we're going to have the ability to, turn it from a trial mode into a full game.
So again, looking at the module, we're looking at a lot of the extensions, we're looking at try and buy, we're looking at ads.
Yeah, so going beyond just the basic gameplay. In this case, the gameplay is sort of very, very simple. Again, they're simple to so we're not detracting from exactly the important concepts that sort of underpin the game and all the extensions.
And again, it's a great framework for anybody to build upon and to add to. They can change the design of the bats, the balls, the actual frame of the actual game in terms of the backgrounds, etc. So let's step into a demo then and let's actually see what we're going to be building today.
Okay, so here it is in all its glory, running in the emulator. It's Turbo Pong in all its sort of form with a nice star field in the background. You can see here we've got some leaderboard information, and there's two little instructions. It says tap here to purchase or tap here to start. I'm not quite sure I like this game, so I'll give it a quick go.
Yeah, let's give it a quick play.
See what we think, shall we?
So in terms of the ads, they're being served by Ad Duplex?
Ad Duplex, yeah. So they're just getting, they're getting sent down. We've registered a bit of code. We've said we want our ads there and we want them to be this big. And they just keep sending them down to us. So
we're using the standard Marmalade S3E plugin for Ad Duplex.
Yeah, so it's actually it comes built in. I think the total number of lines of code is about 30 lines. A couple of functions and some callbacks, and
we'll be showing people how to do that later on, which is great. Yeah, so set up an account, etc.
Yeah.
So again, in terms of the game, 3 lines to the game.
Yeah. So there we go. But it's running so slow. Obviously, my laptop's quite old. I probably need a new one. if lots of people bought this game, I could get a new laptop, you see, and then we wouldn't all be sat here waiting for me to lose.
So one of the key things then is let's look at the purchase. Let's die and then look at the purchase.
Yeah. Let's buy a copy because I like it. I think
the developer needs some money as well for a new laptop.
For a new laptop, yeah. Okay, so we like that. So let's tap here to purchase and see what it does.
So this is actually doing an emulation again using the S3E billing gateway.
Yeah, so this was a single function call that says, buy on the marketplace. And it takes you into here, but it's not available on the market store. This is the kind of placeholder thing that it's showing you.
But it's showing that the emulation is working, and then...
Yeah. And what it actually does here is it'll update the internal flag saying it's now gone from trial mode to full mode. So when we return back into the game, this is essentially someone's just purchased the game.
All the ads have gone.
And the ad's gone, so I get an ad-free game, which is great.
Excellent.
And the developer can buy a new
And again,
laptop.
in terms of the leaderboard, that's all cloud-driven.
Yeah.
So again, as you can see, I'm just slightly losing, so may have to try harder.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, James. So let's step back to the presentation. So we've now just seen a demo of the game, which was really great. So we're going to actually now talk about building that game with Marmalade C++. And we're going to go through all the different aspects involved in doing that. And some of the prerequisites that we definitely need to have as developers is you need a copy of Marmalade, you need a copy of Visual Studio with C++ installed, and you need Windows 8.1 as standard. Again, all those resources are available on the introduction slides, and you can download a free trial of each of those products. Again, in terms of the assets, we've got all those assets available on our GitHub repository. So again, please download them, please look through them. Again, we've documented all the code, so if you want to work through this at your own pace, there's lots of documentation in there in terms of giving you guidance and advice to how we built this solution. So let's talk about gameplay. Gameplay is a really important aspect of a game, isn't it, James?
Yeah, I mean, it's the gameplay. Obviously, there's no game without gameplay, is there? So it's certainly the most important part of a game. This game, for example, is organised into screens, and one of those is a gameplay screen, isolates all the gameplay.
So we've got things like the menu screen, the game over screen, the actual gameplay screen.
Yeah, so those are examples of sort of other, I guess, organisational units that we've put into this game, and they all have a screen has a common set of events and a common sort of layout and structure. So we know what to expect and how to transition between them. And
again, we're calling logic between those screens as such, aren't we, as well?
Yeah. So we can say, well, I'm on the menu screen, I want to go to the game screen, and it'll, the structure there will do that.
So again, in terms of a project structure, it's very simplistic, it's very easy to follow.
Yeah.
Again, it's very adaptable and scalable, so if people want to adapt and change these solutions, that's the whole purpose of them.
Yeah.
We want you to make, interesting games, so feel free to make Pong games. You've got a great framework there to work upon.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the Marmalade Graphics API. What is really important about that API? We've covered it before in terms of OpenGL.
Yeah.
But from a Windows developer perspective, is there certain things we really want to be considered with?
Yeah, I mean, Marmalade supports a number of different APIs, all of which are at different sort of levels in the stack. So OpenGL, that's supported, or OpenGLES, and that's, I guess, the lowest level in the stack. Marmalade provides support for it, but it's not as doesn't have as many features and stuff around it. It is just an OpenGL layer, and I think you can only use 2.0 if you want to target Windows Phone 8 and Windows.
So in terms of our game, we're using like IWTD because we're
we're using one of the higher level ones. So you've got IWGL, which is essentially a GL wrapper. And then above that is IWGX, which is a sort of low-level kind of, frame buffers and
it's got low-level rendering as well,
and all that kind of stuff. So that's where you can say, I've got a load of points in 3D space I want to render, and you send it off, and it's in a cross-platform sort of abstraction. So it's kind of what DirectX and OpenGL provide in different ways, but it's under a sort of a Marmalade kind of API.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you've got IW2D, which is built on top of IWGX, and that says, well, I want to draw a square here on a 2D screen, I want to draw a sprite there on a 2D screen. So we're going to
very adaptable, very flexible in terms of a development approach.
Yeah. So I mean, we can, you can mix IWGX and IW2D. So you could potentially have a 3D model rendered in IWGX with 2D stuff on top of it, and mix and match these APIs. And
together. That's really popular now in those platformers which have a 2D set but have a 3D character model as well, as an actor or a player.
Yeah. So I guess you get hybrid games like that where you could have a 3D animated character running around 2D assets, on a horizontal plane.
So again, great use of being able to use different graphics and different
Yeah.
layouts.
Yeah.
And again, that's all included in Marmalade. So it's
Yeah.
not like you've got to rethink
Yeah.
how to do this. Again, looking at the assets and graphics compressions, Marmalade uses a thing called the Asset Manager.
So it's
That's an important
there's
aspect.
the IW Resource Manager, which acts as an asset manager. So when you're deploying your games to different platforms, you obviously want to take advantage of things like texture compression and stuff. And if you've got a game for Android which uses ETC1, I think, and then you've got iOS which is PVRTC, and then you've got Windows which is DXT5.
Yeah.
So trying to manage all that yourself, is a nightmare. So you can make these declarations in code that say, well, for this platform I want this, for this platform I want that, and then Marmalade will say, okay, that's cool. When I'm doing a Windows Phone 8 build, I'll
automatically convert it, yeah.
And you can choose to use that, or you can choose not to use that. So on top of that as well, you can go one stage further and use DZ files, which are essentially zip files, and they allow you to archive all the assets into one file. You can have multiple of these and mount them as a virtual file system. It's up to you really, but it generally reduces load on the system's file system, the device's file system.
Because it hasn't got the overhead of loading.
Yeah. So if you want to enumerate a directory, you don't need to say to Windows, I want to know all these files. You can just say, it's already loaded in memory because it's it's a static archive, so nothing's going to change. And you get compression out of it as well.
Again, so it's really utilising the maximum performance, getting the best out of the device. And again, being native, being bare metal, it's all about performance.
I think it's pretty quicker. I don't think there's a lot of performance lost in uncompressing these things, so I wouldn't worry about that.
Excellent. So let's look at a demo of building the game with C++. So we'll pass over to James again to talk us through, how to build this game and how to start.
Okay, so I've opened up the project in Visual Studio, and I've now got the cursor onto the main entry point here. But before we take a deep dive, I'll do a quick lap round all the header files to give you just a rough idea of what's there while we're diving deep into the main project. So I'll just go through them in alphabetical order. There's no particular preference on my part. So we've got the player score here. This is just a simple header file that keeps a list of all the player scores that have had a go. We've got a scene.h file. This describes what a scene is. We've got a scene in game file.
And yeah, it's called the IW2D there, so
yeah, sure, yeah. So that's scene in game. So I've prepended all of these with scene, so I know that it's a scene essentially. It's a naming convention I use, and it also sorts them nicely. I could call it in-game scene and manager scene, but then they would be ordered differently and not.
And from a development perspective, a scene is basically a view of the game
as
it's presented on a device.
So it's what we were talking about earlier, the title in game and stuff. We've got a scene manager that orchestrates all of these and directs them and stuff, and then we have a title scene as well, and these header files just contain all the sort of public definitions and information and stuff. So that's kind of the files that we're looking at. They've got corresponding C++ files as well, which just contain the implementation, which we can look through in a minute. So in the main entry point, as every C program, you have your int main. Yeah. And then when we come into that, we want to initialize our resources, which is what we were talking about with regards to text compression and DZ files. So this project actually uses DZ files, but it has there's a feature in Marmalade that lets you do it automatically. It's called auto derb, and I'll show you that in a second.
And you're initializing your scores on the next line.
Yeah, so the next line is called init scores. So we can use a great Visual Studio feature called peak definition.
Yep. And it'll search through the solution to find that function and then give you the response. So
you can quite happily see here, it's basically just making up a bunch of data and sticking it in a list for us to display. So the next thing we've got is our scene manager, and what that's doing is it's setting an initial scene, which we want as a title scene. We could change that to any scene we want, and that would then be the first scene, and that can be useful when you're developing because you're constantly compiling and restarting. And if you're playing on the game scene and you've got a title scene, then a map scene, and then a story scene, and you've got that long trail into the game before you can start testing your code. It's you can just set this up with a bit more data and you can get straight in there and stuff. So we also use a timer as well. We use the S3 timer get milliseconds function, and we basically do a delta time calculation. So we calculate how long the last frame took us to process, and then we use that as a basis for how long this is going to to take. And it's kind of accurate. It works. You know, it's not. You know, we're working to close approximations here. But for it to work, we need to get a base. You know, when the app started, we need to know what it was, because I think this returns the number of milliseconds since 1970 or something. So it would mean our first frame had taken something like 60 years, 50 years to complete. That's not a very good
accurate measure.
Bad things happen then.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the following line, we've got a couple of callbacks. So this is how we register a callback with Marmalade. This is the function that's used to register multiple callbacks.
So you're just using the SE3 again? So you're using
S3E, yeah. I wonder if peak definition here will show us some more things. So, okay, so it's a very big file, but we've got pause, unpause, exit, and you can carry on looking through volume up, volume down.
And they're all standard Marmalade variables, aren't you? That's standard within Marmalade.
Yeah, so these, you know, you could replace this with S3 device foreground, and it tells you here that this is the opposite callback correlating, blah, blah, blah. And then you pass it a standardized function name that you have to cast, because you do, called pause callback, which we've actually declared here. And you can see that we just do a simple C manager pause. And then null, and this is an interesting field because it's user data. So it's something that you can pass in, and it can have any meaning that you want it to. A lot of the times it's used to give context. So these calls are called, you know, from anywhere, and you think, well, I need to know the context, or I need to have some game state that I can access from within this callback, and that's what the user data's for.
So it could be how many lives have been lost, or
yeah, or it could be something bigger, like, I don't know, the current scene you're in, if you wanted to, when you register the callback, which isn't really appropriate here because you know, it's not within a scene. But let's say the scene manager wasn't using static methods, and there was an instance of a scene manager, and you wanted to be able to control the scenes from within this callback. You can actually pass in the scene manager here. And then from within this callback, you can access it through the user data.
Yep.
So it lets you access state whilst keeping it isolated from everything else, which is always good practice. But in this case, we've decided to go with static functions on this, so that's fine.
And then you call in the loop, which just continually runs until the application is quit, because that's doing the update. Yep.
So at that point, we've all set up, we've got our resources loaded, and now we're going to enter into the infinite loop, or it's not really infinite because you'll quit eventually, maybe. And
or your battery will run out.
Or your battery runs out, yeah. And it's never infinite because the universe will end at some point. So S3 device check quit request is pretty obvious. It does what it says on the tin. It returns, what does it return? I think it returns, what's it say now, while it's not true. So yeah, it returns true when you want to quit and false when you don't want to quit. So we just keep on going until the user decides to exit. And that can happen for a number of reasons. You can call an exit function, or you can close it down. If you're on a desktop, you can hit the cross in the corner, or, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's cool. So at the top of our loop, we update our inputs, which is the pointer and the keyboard. We need to do these because it does a lot of bookkeeping in the background to make sure your touches are processed and your keyboard inputs are updated and all that.
And it's
kind
actually
of stuff.
looking and listening to those inputs.
Yeah, if you don't call these, then you'll be wondering why. Well, I'm pressing these keys and nothing's happening. Yeah. Okay. So, and then we handle a special case here, which is the back button, which is a thing for your certification in Windows Phone 8.
Yep. So the back button on the Windows Phone acts like a physical button. So generally, back buttons map to the escape key.
Yeah.
And again, you know, that's a key validation requirement.
Yeah. And in Marmalade, you get it through the keyboard state, but it's actually got its own S3E key back. And what that does is, so you get the state for that particular key, and it returns a bit field with all the different available states, like press, release. Let's see if peak definition works here. This is great, isn't it?
It's a great tool for just actually looking at and seeing what does this, you know, what does it actually do?
Yeah, and you keep the context as well. Yeah. This is awesome. You know, if you've got released here, and you can see it's a bit filled because we're shifting the bits in. So that means you have to AND it with the result, because the result can come back with, you know, a number of bits set, because it's equally valid to be pressed and, well, you can have multiple states in some occasions, but it's always good to use.
But you've got definitely pressed, you've got definitely released.
Yeah, yeah. You couldn't have them both at the same frame, but you know, you might have down and pressed at the same time. So, so yeah, we set a Boolean value with that, which is triggered when we press the back button, and then what we do is we send a signal to the scene manager
to update the scene.
And the scene manager tells the current scene that the back button's been pressed, and that scene can then decide with it what it wants. So if we're on the title screen, for example, that's going to exit the game. But if we're in game, we just want to show a menu.
Yep.
So they're different behaviours based on whichever scene's currently in use. There's also a way to quit as well, using the scene manager. So we can, within our scene, say, hang on a minute, I want to quit the game, as you would on the title scene when you hit the back button. And you set the flag within the scene manager, and we're just checking this here, and then what we do is we break out of the loop.
Yep.
And then come out here down at the bottom.
So very simplistic, really, isn't it?
It's
not
very
doing
logical.
a great amount of function. It's very, very logical in its structure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you can, the parts, so the big parts that will expand are going to be the resource initializations and things like that. But I've seen huge games that have had even smaller loops than this. It's all about sort of putting it in the right places and making it structured and easy to follow. So we're getting on to the time stuff now. So we discussed the time passed since the last frame. So we want to calculate that. So we've got this. So we basically take the current time now and remove the timer from it. So if we go back up here, you'll see that we've set that to an initial value, because if we set it to 0, it would be however many years.
6 years.
Yeah, so...
it's 40 years, isn't it? 40 plus.
Yeah, I don't do maths. Computer does it for me, so, so we have delta t here, which is how much time in milliseconds has passed. And then we update the timer to the current time. We could set it to S3 get milliseconds, but we might as well just add whatever that is onto it. It's more efficient, very slightly. So,
and that's just literally telling us how long the game has been running for.
It tells us how long our last frame was. So if it's taken, so as we go around in a loop, the code will run all the way down here, back up to the top, all the way around again, and it will get back to here. An S3 timer get milliseconds will have a new value, which will be 5 milliseconds more than it was when you last called it, and that means it's taking 5 milliseconds to go once around the loop, and therefore you're getting however many frames
per second.
200 frames a second, something like that. It's quite a high amount anyway. So we've got this value now. We clamp it because we if we didn't, even if we forgot to initialize it to what it was and we did come up with 50 years, it doesn't matter, because it will say, well, anything above 100 milliseconds is madness, so we'll just say it's 100 milliseconds, and of course you can't travel back in time, so anything less than 0, well, it's got to be 0, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you're a time lord or something.
Super fast,
Yeah. So passing delta t, so we've got this value now, and we're happy with it. We've sort of sanitized the value. We're sure that it's not going to do anything daft. We're now happy to give it to our current scene to do with what it is. So we say, whatever scene's currently running, do whatever you do, and then we'll carry on from there. Generally, the updates are for things like moving, gameplay logic, AI, anything that
happens on tick
that isn't drawn, because the drawing and the updates are separated. And then after that, we start preparing to draw. So the first thing we do is we clear everything on the screen.
So we clear the surface, make sure there's nothing being shown, and then start initializing.
We turn lighting on, which is an IWGX thing. I believe that was an issue with some fonts. That we had to enable that, and then we call the current scene and we say let's draw it. And then it'll call all the drawing code associated with that scene, and then once you've finished all your drawing commands, it stacks them into like a buffer, ready to submit to the graphics pipeline, and that's generally more efficient. So what we've got to say here is take everything that we've told you to do so far and just push it all along. Sometimes you'll trigger flushes just through general commands, but it's always a good idea to call it manually just to make sure you've pushed everything through. And then once everything's been drawn to the back buffer, we do a surface show, which will flip the back buffer with the front buffer and present everything that we've drawn on the previous frame. And then a very important call to S3 device yields with a milliseconds counter or value here. And if we don't do that, then none of the bookkeeping that Marmalade does in the background will get called, and things will go horribly wrong. So you always call that. And sometimes you want to call it throughout your code as well. If you're doing a particularly intensive operation that's going to take, tens of milliseconds, and it's probably a good idea to call it as well because it's in SV device yield where you process system events, you know.
So it's like an integrity check, really.
Yeah, and it drops back into the so there'll be some code in that Marmalade runs in a loader that is actually your actual like Windows 8 game loop, and it handles it's the event pump and all that kind of stuff. It maintains memory buffers and all that kind of stuff needs to be run. Otherwise, the phone will go, hang on a minute, you're not processing all the events I'm sending you, right? Okay, I'm gonna hang
or crash or whatever.
Well, the watchdog will close it down, I think, when I think you get 5 seconds or something. So,
so if it's unresponsive for more than 5 seconds, automatically crashes out. Yeah.
So if you don't call SV device yield, it will be deemed unresponsive. So that's why it's so important. You can actually pass a number in here if you want to say, well, I don't, if it runs more than 30 frames a second, that's nonsense to me. So you could say, okay, well, let's lie asleep for 10 milliseconds because I don't need to do anything for 10 more. So that's good for battery life and things. And you could do some calculations based on how your frame rate and work out, well, I only want to go every 30 milliseconds. It's taking me 5 milliseconds, so I'll sleep for 25, and then you're only using 1/6 of the time that you would anyway. So that's the end of the game loop here. That's we get to here and then we come back round again unless we've broken out. Once we've broken out, we assume we're quitting the game, and when we're quitting the game, it's always good to free your resources.
Yeah.
Even though the system's going to do it, it's probably a good idea to do it anyway.
Just best practice, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's kind of the main game loop. That's the whole thing, as such. There. So we can look at some of the other stuff as well that we actually call from this, because obviously that's not just a game there. That keeps everything running.
Yeah, this is purely the loop that just keeps everything there, loading, refreshing.
Yeah. So let's have a look at some resource stuff, shall we? Because let's go back to the top here and let's go to definition this time, because we're really into it. So in this case, we're initializing Marmalade's resource system. So you've got IW2D in it, which is the thing we're using. We've got the resource manager in it, which is we're using the resource manager. That's the DZ files and the group files and stuff that we're looking at.
And we're loading in the additional fonts.
And we're initializing the font system that they supply as well. So once we've initialized these systems, we can actually load all our assets. And there's a file called pongresources.group.
Nice naming.
Yes, I wonder if it's in the project. No, it's not in the project. Okay. Let's go and have a look at that, shall we? Because it is quite a reasonable file to have a quick look at. And this is how you describe your describe all the assets that you have for your game, and it's kept in the data folder. So we've got pong resources.fonts. We've got fonts, resources, and textures. These things are hierarchical, so you'll notice if we open this with Notepad that we define these resource groups in these text files, and we've called it Pong resource group, and all it does is it says, well, I have 2 children, one's Pong fonts, one's Pong textures, and if we close this down, you'll see there's Pong fonts and Pong textures. So
again, there should be a hierarchy within those that reference out there.
Yeah, so you can go as deep as you like if you want, within reason. Again, you've got to keep all this stuff in your head. It gets a bit difficult at times. So what we've defined here is a set of fonts. So it's quite readable. We've called it font TTF, and we've named each one of these instances of a font, because what Marmalade does is it generates these glyphs in memory. So it needs to know every sort of combination you want. So let's have a look at number 6 at the top, and we're saying it's a TTF font.
Yep, it's serif, and it's a size 6.
And it's a size 6. Yeah, it's
so
pretty
very
obvious.
easy to read, very easy to change. I love the naming convention. You're going for the font name, size of font.
And then you can see we've got size 8 and size 12 and then size 16 and size 24. But one thing to note is the more fonts you use, the bigger the more memory that this system will use.
Because you're placing the load and everything we just talked about before in terms of that loop and the loaders.
Yeah. And the more stuff we use, that we need to increase something called the cache texture size. So I'm not sure what it is by default. It's probably something like 512 by 512, but when you start using bigger fonts that are being rendered out to glyphs, it's not enough. So you might get an error message, and you can repair that by
just increasing your text size.
Yeah.
Is there a maximum size you shouldn't exceed? Or
it's probably down to the device. I mean, 4096.
Well, 4096 is I think the maximum limit we really state.
And I don't think I can spell, and and I don't think it will span textures. I
Right.
could be wrong. I need to check the documents, but you can't say, we said texture size 1024. I don't think that will mean that once it's filled one up, it will then create a new one and fill that up.
So it's
I
a
think,
maximum size as such, yeah.
So there are other options for Marmalade. You can use bitmap fonts, which you pre-render offline, and you choose the glyphs that are available, and then you just load that up in your resource manager.
But fonts are so available now as true type fonts.
You kind of want.
Again,
I mean,
it's about the quality, isn't it?
Yeah,
You want crisp.
Yeah,
images.
so for scaling and stuff and different resolutions, true type's always good, but you can't do things like have gradients and outlines and have stylized text, which you can with bitmap fonts. So looking here, we've loaded all these resources, and they've gone, so we loaded Pong resources loaded the other two, so that's all now in memory and we can use it. That's great. So after that, we then want to load our scenes. Should we have a look there?
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what it says. Okay. Well, that's quite reasonable, isn't it? So what it's saying is we have a group of scenes, a set of scenes, and we want to go through each one of them and call load on it.
Yep.
So what's scene IDs? Well, that is an enumeration. I'm using a nice little C++ trick here, where you
Build structs, yeah.
Yeah. So the problem with enumerations is they're globally scoped within whatever structure they're in. So you can get name clashes. So a nice little trick is to wrap it in a struct and then call the enum, and then you get a nice little naming and isolation. So that's just a little
best practice again is creating that isolation you don't get any troughs. So, yeah.
So I mean, it's unlikely you'll have an enumeration value called KE scene title, but you might have other things like won or lost. In a bigger game, there might be multiple won or lost enumerations.
Yeah.
One for the game, one for a little mini game.
Multiple player.
Multiple players. Yeah. So and they you don't want to have to try and name it KE player mini game 1_lost because it loses all meaning.
Create a nice naming convention. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get a bit of type safety because it's within a struct. So. That's really cool. But what we're actually looking at it for is we've defined two scenes, KE title and KE in game. And then another little trick is we have a KE scene count, which basically enum's a 0 index, so that's going to be equal to 0. That's going to be equal to 1. That's equal to 2, which funnily enough is the number of actual values that we want. Yeah. So it means that we can use this KE scene count value in things like loops and array declarations to actually say, okay, we've got that many, and it updates automatically. If you add more scenes into it, that's then if we added one more scene, it would then turn to 3.
It'll automatically count, yeah.
And these things will then update, and you don't have to manage it. It's all there, and it's pretty cool. So that's the scene loading. There's the unloading, all pretty readable. Okay, so that's the resource part of the scene manager. That's all of the resource initialization that we've done. So we'll come back down to here. So we set a scene. That's pretty simple. Again, we're using this, namespace or this structure.
The actual structure of the scene IDs. So again, you've got good naming conventions. So that's the title screen.
Bit of type safety. The compiler will tell you if you get it wrong. If you try and use things like magic numbers to do scenes or strings, it doesn't protect you from spelling mistakes. As I've already proven, I can't spell. So I need the compiler to tell me that I've spelt something wrong, and if I spell it wrong, that's all right. But I'll have to spell it wrong everywhere. You know? So cool, and you'll see how easy this is. It's a very simple thing. It just says, well, the next scene is equal to whatever I've told it to be the next scene to. We don't actually do anything here.
So it's just literally calling the next one in order.
Yeah. So what it's saying is it's sent a flag saying that someone's told me that the next scene to load is going to be this. We can use current scene. So here we go. We can use this scene count thing for another value as well. So we've called set scene. We've set a flag to it, and nothing will happen until we call update on it. I'll drop back into main quickly so we can see how that actually works. So we've set this flag that we were talking about, and we come down here, come down here, come down here, come down here, and then we get to update current scene.
Yep.
So that will drop us back into the file we were just looking at. So now you see the context and where this is being called. And what it says is, we set new scene equal to next scene equal to new scene. And we do a little check here. We say, well, is next scene equal to KE scene count? This is like the quiescent value for that variable. It's a value that says, well, I don't want you to do anything. And it's true because it's not a valid scene. So we might as well use it to say, well, okay, I don't want anything. But in this case, it doesn't equal scene count because we've just set it to title scene. So it's like, okay, so that check, you know, it is not equal to that. So let's go in here. And now we actually call these values.
Yep. So you're calling statuses of that.
So we call on exit and on enter. Yep. And then we carry on. And we're like current scene. And now we set the current scene equal to the next scene. And we set the next scene back to this quiescent value. Yep. So then the next time it runs around, it won't do anything. And then we carry on as normal. So if there is no new next scene, then none of that will get exited. None of that will get called. If there is, it will. But then in both instances, we then update the scene.
Scene with the latest scene, yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of the scene manager there. Close this down. Visual Studio is really cool for this.
I know you wouldn't be using Visual Studio in that format generally, but it works really well as a presentation tool.
Yeah.
So, you know, big fonts, just a Solution Explorer visible.
Yeah. Normally I'm like font 6 or something. Yeah. So okay. So we've now seen how all of this code up to here works. We've nothing special here. We've gone through that. So I think
should we jump in, do what you said as a bit of a deep dive there?
Yeah. So we've got we kind of see how the scene manager works. Now let's have a look at the scene, shall we?
Yeah.
Title scene. That's probably a good one, isn't it? So let's open both of these up. So if we look in here, we see that we're inheriting from the scene class. Let's take a quick look at scene first.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen all the operations that have been carried out on scene, and these are all declared here.
Yep.
They're all virtual, so it means that anything that inherits from scene can override these, which is the behavior that you want. We've got load, unload, update, draw, on enter, on exit, on back button pressed, on resume, on pause.
So basically all the different options that will be available to that game.
Yeah.
So these are the interaction of what happens.
And you could add more. I mean, you could, depending on what you felt was reasonable to be acted on at a scene level. I mean, I think these are all reasonable for a scene to deal with, whereas something like, I don't know, a message event or something that's related to a particular character in the game wouldn't be a good place to put here because it's not related to a scene.
It's not related to a scene, yeah. So this is all functionality.
Yeah, so everything here is related to that. So you might have something like, I don't know, on device resized would be a good one as well, if you were to extend this. And it would be easy to extend because you could add it and then any classes that wanted to sort of react to that can just override it. And you'll notice as well it's an abstract class. So these are all set to 0. Which means everything that overrides it inherits scene has to override these, otherwise the compiler will say sorry. And it makes sense because you have to load stuff, you have to unload stuff, you have to update and you have to draw. Yep. Otherwise it's not really a scene.
It's not really a scene.
Yeah. So that's kind of enforces that again, it says to you when you've made a mistake, when you're programming at 3 a.m. So you can see here we've got scene title that inherits from scene, publicly inherits. That's a key part because by default it's private. Mm-hmm. And then we've got these virtual things that we have to do. And then we've decided that we want to react to these as well.
Yep.
And we've got some private things that we've decided that we want. So initialize stars, update stars, and draw stars. So they're all related to the stars. And then we've just got some private data that we want to keep about, this screen. And this screen mostly is all about the stars.
So it's the stars all cascading down the scene. So it's counting how many there is, where they are, what the locations are.
I think it'd be awesome if someone could modify.
And again, what the velocity is.
Well, yes, they all, they all have. You'll see the star structure here. I mean, it's a simple little thing, and they've got a position and velocity, and that's all stored in an array of star count. We've used static const variables, which is always good. So yeah, that's your array of stars, and we update those in the main code. I was saying I think it'd be cool if someone could make it so it's like you're going into the star field, instead of
the
it
stars
just
are coming
down.
out.
Yeah.
So they're doing the z-axis.
Yeah. So and you could do it an easy way just by like pushing out from the center of the screen, or you could do it the real way with proper maths. It's a good experiment anyway. So in the scene title, you can see here there's quite a bit of code, but most of it's very simple. Just including header files we need, usual stuff. So this one's got its own load because we've got a header font and a title font. These are what you've seen drawing things in. And way back in the main scene here, where we've loaded these resources, we've loaded them into memory, and now we want to access them.
Yep.
So we access them through IW Resource Manager, and everything's named.
So it's the IW get function, yeah.
IW get resource manager, which returns the sort of the instance of it's a global instance, and then you've got a method called get resource named, Now, you remember those little names that you thought were really cool?
Yeah, so there's your
There they
font
are.
names, yeah. So that's the size of your fonts that you're going to be using.
And that's what you're getting. So that kind of tells the resource manager that I want a CI WGX font.
Yep.
And then you need to cast it because this returns a CI resource thing that's like a.
This is basically saying, go and get those resources and bring them into my game.
And turn it into that type. So it's a font essentially. So we've now got access to these. Let's have a look at the unload because you should always look at your unload when you look at your load. And it says delete image. Actually, I've just realised that the IWGX cleanup we do cleans these up for us. But if we had a screen that we were creating and deleting, then we should release these resources. Yeah. So in this particular instance, it's a very simple game. We keep everything in memory all the time, so we don't bother unloading it.
Yeah. Which makes sense for tutorial.
It was just a trick question for myself, why not? You can see we've got back button handling. We're in the title screen. We've decided we want to quit when we're in the title screen. So yeah, we call that quit game. And we saw the check-in main. Let's have a quick look at that again. So down here, we're checking for quit requested. So we don't set a boolean directly because we want to keep that sort of encapsulated the idea of what triggers a quit. So let's have a quick peek. It's a very simple thing. You'll see it just sets true, but it could have other stuff involved. Well, you could call quit game and it might do something else. Mm-hmm. So
it might end up like throwing up a banner ad or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Game. So you might not want to quit out. You might say, okay, well, what I want to do is I want to do this first, or you might decide, no, actually, I don't want to quit. Ignore whatever that thing's saying.
So quit game could say, leave feedback. Rate my app.
Yeah, totally. And it means if you call this multiple times, so that works really well because it's what's called an idempotent action. So it means you can call it multiple times, but it'll only have an effect once. So I could call, let's have another look at this. So I could call quit game in one update loop 100 times, and it's not going to spawn 100 ad banners saying please come back. What it does is it'll wait until it checks whether you've requested a quit, and then once and once only, it will then show you that banner.
Which is nice. It's not upsetting the user.
Yeah, can you imagine that? 100, no, I really want to quit. Are you sure? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Yeah, I think you'd lose your users pretty quickly there. So we've got the on enter, which simply initializes stars, and the code for that is just below. And this is very easy. This basically takes the width and the height of the screen. It goes through the whole list of 128 and basically just puts them in random positions, which is what a star field looks like.
Exactly.
And if you were to make a really cool into the screen one, this is where you'd start. And you'd also carry on and update stars, which basically just moves them all in their velocity.
Flying cheese balls instead of stars.
Flying cheese
I've just
balls,
noticed that code comment there.
Yes. I think that would be a great idea, So, so I mean, it's quite obvious. I'll leave it there for a couple of seconds. It's just you'd have a little read through. But you can see here.
Sorry, can you just go back because you rubbed your microphone on your beard there.
Just how far back to?
Oh, just 2 sentences back.
What was I saying? Well, I can't remember what I was saying.
So you can see there something.
I'll start on update stars.
Yeah.
This is cool that you can cut this stuff together. I'll give it a few seconds and carry on. So here's the update stars method. You can see it takes a delta t, which is that thing that we spent time calculating to work out how fast things move.
How far things have moved from.
We have our width and height of the screen, so we know where when a star goes off the screen.
And again, that's platform agnostic.
Yeah, so the screen can be as big as you want, and it'll look cool. And then we go for every single star in a loop, and we use a plus operator there beforehand, a pre-increment instead of a post-increment, because that's more efficient by a tiny weeny amount. In this particular instance.
But again, it's about those best practices of just adding that little bit in saves a lot at the end.
Yeah.
A little equals a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's somebody's advert.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then you've got your percentages of how you want to actually...
well, what this thing here does is... so we update... So what we say, it's a very simple maths, this. It's position equals a position plus the velocity times delta t. So the velocity might be 2 meters a second.
Yep. Speed versus time.
Yeah. And we've only moved 10 milliseconds forward, so we only move however many centimeters, and so it keeps it all balanced on variable frame rates. And then what we've got to do is we've got to check, okay, am I off the screen? Yes. So what we do here, So these percentages are a modulus function. So what we're saying is we want a random number, and this returns anything between 1 and maximum integer, which is like millions. And then we do a mod operation against the width. So what that'll do is work out the remainder. So it will divide that number that could be anything between 1 and millions by the width of the screen, and that will give you the remainder, which will be between 0 and the width of the screen. So that's what those little things do there, which is quite an easy way to randomize the position of things. So so that keeps our star field going. We randomize the velocity somewhere. We add a 30 onto it because we don't want stars hitting 0, because eventually they'll all end up not moving anywhere. And that'll probably be like the end of the universe, wouldn't it, with no stars, which wouldn't be very fun. We want our stars to move. So. And then the drawing's really easy as well. We just iterate through again, same loop, but this time we actually draw them. So we create a color, and we set it grey. Yeah.
But again, if you wanted to change that color, you could just change that value there, set to different.
Yeah, you could make multicolour stars if you want. I mean, I set it to grey, and I set it to grey for a reason. Gumball. yeah, totally. But a nice little trick here is I pick the velocity y and I multiply by 2 for some arbitrary factor, but essentially set the greyness of the star equal to the velocity. So the slower it's going, the dimmer it is. So it means that the stars that are moving the slowest appear to be further away and more dimmed out. So it wouldn't be as good as someone a star field coming out of the screen or whatever. That's for someone else to do. And then we do, we call the IW2D functions, which are kind of a state-based thing. So you set the state up, i.e. I want the colour to be this, and then you do an action, so I want to draw. And then we iterate through this, and then because it's a state-based system, we replace it back to what it was, which is white. Yeah, so it means when we do other stuff, so that's another way to set a colour. That's your hex values.
Yeah. So in terms of the naming, does it support standard name colours?
I'm sure there's some definitions somewhere for them in the documentation, but you could define your own colours as well if you wanted. You just set some identifiers equal to, so you could just have a variable called white equal to that, and then you could place that. And then it's an interesting way of doing it because it means that if you decide, well, I don't like white anymore, I want red, you just update that one and then it goes through the whole thing. So we've got the update here, we've got the pointer get state thing. Similar, we're randing against a bit field, and that tells us whether we've, whether we've tapped a button, and if we have, it says tap to play, so we play. Yep. And update the stars as well. And you'll see here, it's a simple transition, set scene, and again, as we've seen before, it doesn't set the scene immediately; it just sets a flag up to then transition out of the scene. And then the big one, the draw. So we have draw stars. We've seen that. We set our font color. And then we start drawing our labels. So another little trick here is we're using these, we're creating a scope, basically, that we can have local variables inside that then...
for example, font sizes, etc., colours.
Yeah, so we have like label left, label right, top, and these only exist within this scope. So it means we can reuse these identifiers here. So we don't have to have, we don't have to call this title label left, right, title label left, whatever.
Yeah, so you've got a framework which you can just adapt and use, and it's already predefined layouts.
Yeah. We set our font. I've put a warning there saying we are changing the font, if you hadn't noticed. We set our alignments up. So again, this is more state. So you're setting it up to how you want it, and then you call the draw action here.
Which populates it with
the text. Yeah, turbo pong. You probably want to check these out. They all do different things. I haven't got time to explain every single one now, but it's all in the documentation. Okay, so what we have here now is the score drawing. So you see we work out the center offset and the row spacing. So between each item in the list, we have 32 pixels between them. And the center offset is we pick the center of the device and we offset it by 40 pixels, just so it aligns better on the screen, just for a bit of presentation and stuff.
So then when you actually look at the device, the game is literally in the middle.
Yeah, because if we had the list in the middle, the title is quite big and it wouldn't look in the center, so we push it down a little bit so the big title, you get equal spacing and it looks, who thought a coder had design talent.
UI is so important today in today's apps. So if you're not a good designer, think about speaking to designers.
Yeah, sure.
Design is 100% of the sale today.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff like rules of threes and fractions and things, the way you make it look, and colours and Pantones and stuff that, I know nothing about. But they're the things that make your game sell.
Definitely.
So they're really, really important. So this is the point where we work out what the top of the list is. We're basically saying, you know, we take the size of the list and shift it so it centers, just what we're talking about. And then we go through a loop, and we print every single item here, setting up fonts, drawing the label text. We actually use an sprintf here to actually print the name and then the score. And
again, you talk about alignment there as well, where you want the text placed on the screen.
Yeah, so we're saying we want it to align it vertically in the middle and center. So we're
so it's 0.5, 0.5 from the stuff we did with the Lua.
Yeah, so the coordinate that we specify is going to overlap the center of the label. So that's cool, and that's everything the title's seen, you know. And the gameplay is much of a muchness, you know, apart from the actual gameplay elements. So we've got all the sort of structure out of the way, how to draw things, how to colour things, all that kind of stuff. So all that remains really is the actual gameplay itself, which is pretty simple. So let's take a look at that, shall we? So let's open up the in-game scene. So we've seen most of this stuff before, so I won't explain, you know, everything in here. I'll just go through the key points that are gameplay related. So again, we're using consts to set up our gameplay rules.
Yep, so number of lives.
Yeah.
Ball velocity. If the ball was going a bit too slow, we can just whack that up.
Yeah. We've got our this is our game state. This is this is often much more complex, which it is. You know, we don't often just have two paddles and stuff, but
in a ball size and a ball height.
yeah, exactly. So, but in this, you know, simple games, simple rules. Let's keep it simple. You can see all the loading stuff here. I guess the only thing that's slightly different is we're loading a texture. So you'll notice here we've got CIWX font, and we call you know, a slightly different function signature here. So it's slightly different. We're telling it it's a texture type, and then there's a particular flag there that we want to use. I think this flag is designed to stop it unloading the texture when you don't want it to. But again, documentation's there, take a look at it.
So docs.malade.com, everything's there, and the C++ references.
And even just hovering over it tells you. So there's a lot of, and peak definition as well. Peak definition.
Peak definition, great tool.
That's changed my life. Okay, so we've got the back button pressed, yes, okay. In this case, we want to go, we decide we're not going to quit, we're going to go back to the title screen. We have some, so the on pause on resume is a device feature.
We're going to talk about that in a second, so let's skip that bit because that's the next section.
Yeah, we'll show you that, but it's quite a cool little feature. And it's very easy as well, it just sets state. We have our on enter, and this basically resets the gameplay every time we come in, because we've got our game state, but if we leave the game and then come back, that state's still going to be the same, so we need to reset it back to a fresh state to make sure everything's all good. We have a start round, which resets the balls and stuff. We have an update AI. Now, this AI is something that someone should take on as a project and make, because at the moment...
Because at the moment you just got the back going on.
And it's impossible to win, because the bat's always there. So, you know...
Don't tell people it's impossible.
Why? Do you think you can beat the machine?
Beat the machine.
Yeah. So we have an update ball. So this updates the position of the ball using what I say the physics, but it's way more basic than physics. It's just essentially adding a velocity to your position and then changing the velocity when you hit the bounds of the level or you hit one of the paddles that are there. But within this, we have the checks for who wins. So, okay, if it goes out of the level bounds, i.e. I miss it, then the AI scores. Exactly. I lose a life. If my lives are 0,
end of game.
Game I lose. If they're not 0, then we call start round. This is that thing up here that basically resets all the state.
Resets state, takes a life off you, and you're into round 2.
Round 2, whatever. Lots. And then we've got the case when the player beats the AI. So this is really just here to pay it lip service, because at the moment it is impossible to beat the AI. But if you decide to build something more complex or whatever to control the bat, you know, it might only work occasionally, or add a bit of randomness in there. Will it get it? Will it not? You can then start scoring as a player. So you can then deal with the player scoring, and then you start around again. And of course, you don't ever have to go back to the title screen, because you'll never lose lives if you keep winning. You'll keep getting more. Okay, so there's some more maths here. You know, I think this just sets up the.
This is just basically the
AI
AI,
panel.
isn't it, on the player,
Nothing exciting, but it's worth again taking a look at it. Then we have the update player. That's an easy one. That basically just reads. It says, "Am I touching the screen? If I am, then set the paddle to where I'm touching the screen on the
It just
X."
moves it across.
It certainly
Left
does.
or right?
Yeah, instantaneously. So our main function for this scene, here we are, the update and the delta t, as we've discussed before. We'll ignore that, but essentially if we pause, we don't do any updates. This is all to do with the resuming code as well from a pause.
Yep.
And if we're not resuming or anything like that, then we update the ball, and then update the AI, and then update the player. Simple as that.
Yep.
All easy. You can read it there. You can reason about this flow of your logic of the whole game just in that 120 line function. So we have some funky drawing in the game. We have a center line that's sort of drawn with lots of dots.
Yes, this is a dotted line across the middle, which is basically the halfway line.
Yeah, and that's designed to be drawn across the whole size of the screen. So again, we scale it out, and it just gets drawn even longer. That's called within this draw. You'll notice the lack of delta t. So we don't have any timing information in the drawing. We don't care about time at all. We just draw what the state of the game is at the moment. We decouple them. If you start mixing in drawing code with your update code, you get into trouble.
Yep.
Again, that's more resuming stuff. We always draw the paddles. So we've got part of the resuming is we hide stuff and then show it again when we're back into the gameplay because we want to give the player a bit of chance to continue. So we always draw the paddles, but we hide certain stuff like the balls and that to not confuse people. And then the final bit, of course, is drawing all the labels and the scores and stuff. And again, this is...
And you chose to use a white font.
Yeah, so it's white. And again, capital or lowercase, and we pick the font and we align it. So we set this stuff here because it's shared between all of the things. So we only set this up once, and then it will stay as it is until you change it. So instead of having this pasted 4 times, we just
create one.
Yeah. And then, this is more the countdown stuff. We'll show you that in a sec. And then, of course, unload. So we actually do some resource deallocation.
So you delete the paddle and delete the ball,
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it.
That's a great demo.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty
extensive
deep dive. I need some scuba gear now, I think, to get the bends when I
hold your breath and come up for air. Come on.
Yeah.
So let's move on back to the presentation, and we can talk a bit about pause screens.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about pause screens, and this isn't a screen on the device, this is an action, what happens to the device. So let's consider mobile devices. One of the biggest things that happen when people are playing at the bus stop on their phones is they get a phone call. So what happens when something like a phone call happens and they're currently in game? So this is what we're going to define as pause screens. So pausing's something that happens, and it happens all the time. It could be a notification, it could be the user switches between the game to another app. Again, what happens when that does occur? So what we're talking about is how to pause something, how to resume something, and how it's handled in that callback event.
Yeah, we want it to be a good experience for the player, don't we?
Yeah, you don't want somebody to take a phone call and then return back to the game and go...
Just as they're going to get shot or something.
I've died.
Yeah.
I was doing really well. Or it crashes.
Yeah.
So, platform uses, in terms of the Windows Store, pause is really a great resolution when a game is too small to show on the screen. So from snap view, etc. Again, pause and suspend. So the whole issue of moving the app to a background, so the ability to multitask through.
Yeah.
You're currently doing something, phone rings, you need to check an email. Again, on Windows Phone, it's triggered when the app suspends.
Yeah.
So does the device go to sleep? What happens to the game? And again, it's triggered with the back button. So if you're going back through the menus, pause is triggered in that way as well.
You press and hold as well, can't you? And it brings
press and hold, and it brings up the multitasking menu.
Yeah.
Again, you want the game to pause while you, switch through your different apps. So let's do a quick look at the pause screen settings within the game.
Yeah.
So then we can talk through how that actually works.
Yeah. Do you want me to show you how it looks and then show you?
It'd be great if we can see how it looks and then talk about what the code is behind it.
Awesome. Okay, so we have Turbo Pong opened up in the Marmalade simulator. You'll notice the lack of ads and stuff, but this is an earlier version of the game. We haven't quite got there yet. So the Marmalade simulator has some really cool features, as you pointed out earlier, for accelerometers and that, but you can also send events to it, which are exactly like the ones you've described. So let's say we go in game, and I'm going to beat this AI, because we know that's possible. And we're coming along, and then I get a phone call. So let's simulate a suspend, and I'm on the phone talking, and it's like, oh, okay, great. And now I'm coming back, and I'm like, it's going really fast. I'm winning. And then let's give them 3 seconds to get ready.
Yeah.
And then we can carry on. And it's like, okay, great. I've not lost where I am. I can see where everything is that I need to see, and
from a user perspective, you're ready to go. You're ready to get back into that game.
Yeah, and I also, let's just do it again, you know. Let's say, oh yeah, another phone call, let's carry on. And I can also set this up. So I'm able to interact and get myself ready as you give. So that's a great user experience, you know. So it's something to consider. So it's quite simple the way that this was implemented, really. So we've seen bits of it on that deep dive that we've just been through. So I won't go so far into it this time. Just highlight the areas. And the key one is the update. We don't want to update anything, as we said before. When we're resuming, we want a 3-second countdown.
Yep. And that can be changed. You can easily change that.
Yeah. So we'll find all references, because that's another great tool. But it's still loading. No, my laptop's being very slow. But okay, so we set the start countdown to say 3 seconds, and then while it's larger than 0, we take off the amount of time every frame, and that will count down to 0 then.
It's just loaded at the bottom now.
Okay, that's cool. I'll leave it for now. But we keep on. We count down 3, and then once we finish counting down, we carry on the game logic.
Get ready, yeah.
Yeah, and we want to show this to the user. So there's actually some logic in the draw here. So we're saying, if the start countdown is smaller than or equal to 0, then we can draw this stuff. So what that basically says is kind of the opposite, that when we are in a countdown, we don't draw this. Because it'll interfere with where the label is, and we don't, the ball and stuff.
So you always draw the labels and always draw the paddles, so it doesn't interfere.
Yeah, and then the last little bit here is the actual, the countdown itself. So we have a label, we do some fancy printing to it. So, we say resume in, and then we pass in, what it is. And we cast it to an integer, so it doesn't say, in 2.91783 seconds, it just goes 3, 2, 1 for more drama and better effects. And then the little trick there to make sure you convert it properly to an int. And then we draw it, and then that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so that's the entire pause, resume.
Yeah.
And, that's the ability.
Callbacks, haven't we, I guess? Yeah.
That's the ability to add that functionality into your game to handle, if somebody gets a phone call or if they switch between the apps. So great. The unpause and unpause are very simple. The actual functionality we've just seen, and this is all that you do here, is you set it to true, and then you set it to false, and then you set your countdown up. Superb. So thank you for that. So we're going to now move on to deploying the game to an actual device. So now we're going to talk about how to deploy your actual game onto a device. So in this example, we're going to walk through what you need to do to deploy the game. We're going to be choosing Windows Phone to actually deploy this to. And again, what we're trying to say is it's not difficult to do this. It's very, very simple.
It's simple.
Use the IDE to do it. And again, that allows you to really test what the functionality is.
Yeah.
We're going to be using the emulator just because we're doing this as a Microsoft Virtual Academy. All you need to do is actually select to a real device, and it will deploy that, the actual game to a real device if you have a real device. So I'm going to pass over to James again for a demo on how to deploy your game to a device.
Okay, so I have Visual Studio open here with the project. The key parts to look at are up here. So we have the architecture, the debug release mode, and then what you're targeting. So if we were going to put it on a device, it's very easy. You just select ARM and then wait for it to transfer, and you'll see it says device there. You'd plug a device in and then run it. If there's no device attached, you'll get an error. It's as simple as that. But we're going to put it on x86, which is the simulator as we've described. There are multiple simulators you can choose from. You've got the 512, and then there's a massive list here, 720p, WVGAs, play around, have fun, test out your layouts and stuff with all these different emulators. So when you pick the one that you want to run it on, we're going with the 512. You hit play, and then as if by magic,
it's going to build the solution and fire up the emulator.
You can see everything's done in there, and then there we go. We're running in debug mode, so you get a debug bit there. And there's our beloved Turbo Pong.
With our adverts.
With our adverts that are making us loads for a new laptop.
Yep.
And that's everything that you need to deploy from Visual Studio.
Very, very simple to deploy. Again, in terms of submitting this to store, once we've tested it on the device and the emulator, ensured that everything works, we can just simply submit this through using the publishing guidelines that we previously talked about, and that we'll talk about on the final module today in terms of the finishing touches.
Yeah.
So again, very, very simple. And you can actually test this on all the different spec devices. So as we said, this is a low spec device, and you'll see a massive improvement when you try it on the high performance devices. So thanks for that demo, James, and let's step back to the presentation. So, as a quick module review, we've talked about, welcome to what we're going to be building, and we've shown you the Pong game, so Turbo Pong. We've talked about building a game in Marmalade C++ and walked you through how that game is actually built. We've talked about how to deploy the game onto a device or onto an emulator. And again, feel free to download the source code so you can actually work through these resources at your own speed and get ready to build games with C++ and Marmalade. So I'd like you to join us on the next module where we'll talk about building cloud services into your game so our leaderboards are attached to the cloud so we can have multiple players saving their scores.
And the world knows that I can beat you.
And the world knows that you can beat me, yes. So thank you. Welcome back to Module 3, creating your first game with Marmalade. On Module 3, we're going to be talking around cloud services. So let's look at what we're going to be covering. In terms of an overview, we've done Module 1, Introduction of Marmalade. Module 2, building the actual gameplay. Module 3 is the module we're going to talk about now, which is cloud services. So let's look at the overview of what we're going to be discussing in Module 3. So Module 3 is cloud services. We're going to be discussing why cloud services, introducing GameSparks, which is an actual bespoke middleware for gaming cloud services. We're going to talk about how to sign up for GameSparks. We're going to talk about how to design your leaderboard. And then we're going to talk about the Marmalade SDK. And then we're going to actually go and create an in-game leaderboard for the game. So key thing today is why we use cloud services. There's really 4 different aspects to why it's important. And number 1 being agility. Number 2 being cross-platform support. Number 3 being a single back-end to all your infrastructure and code. And number 5, looking at the virtual goods and management. Some of the other key aspects are analytics, which then you can, once you've got a cloud service, you can actually start to understand how your users or your game players are using the game and better understand what the attraction parts of the game are. So let's look at what the different aspects are. Number 1, we have a cloud gaming service called Windows Azure, and we have a great service with Azure Mobile Services, and that allows you to connect a game into a back-end cloud service. But we won't be talking really much about Azure today because we're going to focus on the GameSpark service. But there is some great offers. So if you want to get started with Azure, you can do that completely free. Just go to the following URL. If you're a member of BizSpark, you can access Azure. And if you're a university student with DreamSpark, you can speak to your university and get access to the Azure Education grants. So please do that. This is the URL where you can get a 1-month trial. So please feel free to sign up for a 1-month trial of Windows Azure. It's a great service, and if you don't want to use a bespoke service, you can roll your own. And I know that you've had experience of rolling your own game services, James.
Yeah, I mean we've had a look at the like the mobile game services that are available in Azure, workers and like web front ends and stuff. It's all pretty easy. You can use it within Visual Studio and that. So
the key thing today is we're focusing on the middleware just because it's creating your first game,
Yeah, sure.
To actually create a cloud service does require some time. We've built some great blueprints on the architectural blueprint site. But, we want you to get started as soon as possible, so GameSparks is a great solution. One of the great things about GameSparks is it actually sits on Windows Azure.
Yeah.
So they're an Azure customer. They've built a solution which sits upon our services. So again, you are using a Microsoft cloud to run your game.
Yeah.
So let's do a bit of introduction to what GameSparks is. So GameSparks is a back-end platform service. It's a multiplayer service. Can you give us a bit of a roundup of what you've been using GameSparks for?
Yeah, so we built a game called Flip Sports, which runs completely on GameSparks. So that we use lots of features like challenges, which allows me to send you a challenge, and then the gameplay will sort of progress, and at the end, whoever wins, will win the challenge. You can use this in all sorts of other types of games. If we're playing a first-person shooter and you've got 2 teams, and that would be a challenge. I guess the traditional games would have lobbies, and you'd sort of hook up, and that would be what a challenge is that particular game. Managing virtual products and in-app purchases, restoring purchases and tracking what I've bought in my virtual currencies. So that's something that's quite complicated because if you're running a game that does have a virtual currency, then you're going to need to track how much each user's got, what they've bought, and they're going to want to restore that and potentially use it across different devices, as you've said before.
Creating a very simple game, you can create a turn-based game very easy.
Oh yeah.
We're going to be talking about building a leaderboard later on today, so it's very, very simple for somebody just to log into a portal and build a service, and then just connect that code to
Yeah,
the
and you
game.
can start off really easy with lightweight leaderboards and just achievements and maybe IAPs, but then you've got the ability to scale it out and build it into something. I think there's a sort of Clash of Clans type game that's on the platform at the moment, so you can go right up to that sort of.
And if you go to gamesparks.com, they're sort of listing what their showcase games are and who the customers are. And
yeah, we could have a look in a sec.
Excellent. Okay.
If you're interested.
So one of the key things about Marmalade and why we're discussing GameSparks is there is an actual SDK which supports Marmalade directly to GameSparks.
Yeah.
So again, from a developer's perspective, you can just use the SDK that's there and connect directly in.
Yeah.
That's superb. So we're going to be using that as well, aren't we?
Yeah, we certainly are.
Excellent.
Well, can see that I beat you.
So let's talk about what the sign-up process for GameSparks is. Is it what are the boundaries or hurdles to getting into GameSparks?
Yeah, not many really. You just need to sign up on the website, and it's all fully automated.
Go to gamesparks.com, and
you
can sign up, and we're actually going to step through that process as well.
We're going to have a look at the website and sign up. And
that's great. So let's look at a demo of stepping through that process and doing a sign-up.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so as you can see, I've gone to www.gamesparks.com. We're on the homepage here. We were talking about some of the games that were on GameSparks. So they've actually got a showcase area. So let's have a little look at what's on here. So if we scroll down, we see we've got
Gunfinger of My Pixel Toys.
Yeah, MMX Racing by Hutch, United Front.
And again, it's completely cross-platform, as you can see on the games that are listed there.
Yeah, sure. I think this one's. So this one's Rocket Rainbow. I think it's Team 17 are publishing that one. So Northfell, that's the one I was talking about that was the Clash of Clans type game. Yep. So you can see there's a massive variety of games here. We've got a racing type game and I guess a shoot 'em up of some kind, all the way down to Clash. You've
got one of yours down there as well, Flip Sports.
We've got Flip Sports, yeah. That's the live fantasy action game, which is pretty cool if you're into football. And then just all sorts of stuff. So we can see, like you say, all multiple platforms and things like that. So it's pretty cool. Let's go through the sign up process, which is very easy and won't take us long. So if we go to register on the top right, you'll see that you're presented with quite a simple form to fill out. So let's sign up as Tarquin, and I don't know what email address. Let's pick one. I don't know.
Tarquin at thepalace.com.
Tarquin at thepalace.com, password, company name, Cheese in Corp, and then a phone number, whatever. And then all you need to do is you just hit accept, and then you click the register button. I'm not actually going to do this because
we're not Tarquin at the Palace.
I don't have that email address. If I had that email address, then sure.
But it's a very simple click and register.
Yeah, you click and register, you'll receive an email, and it's just a standard sort of process.
So it's a validation. You just click on the email.
You click on the email, it'll log you back in, and then you'll be presented with this page. And we'll talk about this in a minute.
Okay, excellent. So very, very simple sign-up process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
So let's look at what GameSparks actually offers. So you've got a 10,000 AU.
Yeah, so this is the free sign-up I've just done here.
Yeah, so this is confirmed in the email saying what you're going to be allocated to.
Yeah. So we've just logged in, and this is immediately what we get.
Brilliant. And you get 25 gigs of storage, and that can be storage for your in-game activities. So storage if you want to save game states or consumable items or durables.
Yeah. So and a lot of that stuff doesn't really take up much data. 25 gigs is a lot of data.
Sounds a lot of data, yeah. So 20 gig of data transfers as well.
Yeah.
So that's a significant number of data transfers.
Yeah.
20 million API calls.
Yeah.
And 20 million push notifications. Yeah. So you've got a support of 10,000 users per game, and you've got all these data transactions. So again, from a small indie perspective or a new startup's perspective, this is, you've got cloud services pretty free.
And that's just to highlight monthly active users. So you can have 100,000 users, and if only 9,999 log in, through the month, then it's completely free.
Completely free. And then once you go over, it's like pence per user, isn't it? So it's negotiable rates as well.
Yes, we can have a look at the pricing page as well in a bit. But
brilliant.
They've got it's a reasonable pricing structure.
So there is a dedicated pricing page, which is at the URL. So again, you can look at how many users. You can do some predictions on how many monthly users do you think you're going to get.
Yeah.
And our recommendation is based on the current downloads you have on your existing apps.
Yeah.
The opportunity to the user base.
Yeah.
And again, don't be frightened that if you do go over those monthly users, the costs aren't going to be prohibitive.
No.
It's just about understanding that there is a cost and negotiate with GameSpark.
And I think if you are, getting over 10,000 users a month, you're doing all right.
You should be doing
aren't
it
you?
well, yeah. So your revenue stream should be there from either being in-app or being a premium product.
Yeah.
So let's look at design a leaderboard in GameSparks then. So we've created our GameSparks account.
Yeah.
We've got confirmation. We know what we're going to be using and how much service access we have. So let's look at the things that are involved in building the actual leaderboard.
Yeah.
So let's go to a demo for building a leaderboard in GameSparks.
Okay, so back on this page that we just signed up in, so what we need to do is we need to sort of create a game, because you can have multiple games in your account, which is cool because you generally
you're going to have a number of different games with different cloud services behind each game, aren't you?
Yeah. So let's click the big plus button, and this gives us the information for our game. So we've made a game called Turbo Pong. So let's call it that. So you can call it anything you want. It doesn't obviously have to line up. Description: the best game of Pong you will ever play. Although I need to spell that properly. And you get a few different templates. They're not showing up here for some reason, but you can have game templates on GameSpark. So if you can have one
like turn-based,
Clash Plan, or whatever types of games. I'll have sort of scripts and things kind of pre-structured for you. So that's pretty cool. So if we hit save here, and then we're presented on the overview of the configurator page. So we get a API key and an API secret, which is pretty standard for these sort of things. And you'll notice you've got things like your Facebook secrets and your Twitter integrations, and these sign-up bonuses are quite cool. So if I sign up, a customer signs up to your game, you can say, well, I'll have 1,000 free coins.
So if you populate the Facebook and Twitter APIs,
they can sign in through Facebook.
They can sign in, so that creates the OAuth authentication system for your game. So again, it creates an authentication system so people can log in.
Yeah, all you need to do is integrate the Facebook client into your game, and then you do a login there and send off the token of GameSparks through a special request. And
so it makes it super easy to social connect your games.
Totally, and it gives you options for things like, let's find all my friends on Facebook who are using this game, and it's dead easy. So so that's quite cool. But we're looking at leaderboards today, so let's click on the leaderboards part. Very simple. There's a quick create button. So there's a few little things it does in the background. So we're creating a leaderboard called Scores. Showing the world I can beat Lee.
No, you can't.
And then we'll call that Scores. So that's the name of the leaderboard. Now, to populate a leaderboard with data, we need to send information up to GameSparks that contain things like our scores, and this is what we're putting in this line here. It's a very simple leaderboard. It just takes our scores. So I'm going to call that Scores. We'll give it a short code because we're always sending our latest score. You can do other types of leaderboards like aggregation. So every time you play a game, you can get a set number of points, and then it can add them up. And
But we just want a fixed leaderboard that just has the latest score of each.
Yeah. And we obviously, the person with the max. You see, you've got different operations here. Some count, so we could count the person who's played the most number of games. So every time we play a game, we send an event, and then it counts them up, and they can sort that into a leaderboard.
Yep.
But we're only interested in who's got the highest value, which is cool because it means that if I score 1,000. And upload that, and then score 500, it'll ignore that. And,
So it only updates your latest highest score that you receive on the game.
Yeah. So we've got these options here. We've got ascending, descending, and none. So if I set it to ascending, then Lee would be at the top of the leaderboard because it starts at the smallest.
Oh.
But we don't want that, so we want it in descending. So I'm at the top, and then we can save that out. And then that's created in the GameSparks portal now. So that's
your leaderboard really configured from a GameSparks perspective.
So this quick create thing does a few other bits. So you look in your event part, and it's created an event there, and the running totals. So there's a few other little bits it does to make it dead easy for you to do. But yeah, as you say, that's all configured now in GameSparks. And you're ready to connect your client up to it.
Brilliant. So we'll talk about in a bit about connecting the actual client back into the leaderboard service and getting that to run. But that's a great demo, and it really shows how simple it is to create a leaderboard. It was, 6 text box entries.
Yeah.
So again, great start to building your first game with a cloud backend.
So including our sign up, we've spent about a minute and a half now.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we've seen the demo of building the leaderboard with GameSparks itself. So now we're going to talk about the GameSparks Marmalade SDK, because what we want to do is join our Marmalade game to our GameSparks GameSpark's leaderboard.
Yeah,
So that's GameSpark as well. GameSpark's leaderboard. So this is really important, aspect of understanding what this is. So this is actually an extension, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is an extension that you can easily add to your Marmalade project, and it gives you access to the APIs that allow you to interact and connect your game up to GameSpark's.
So again, this has been built as a Marmalade extension. It's been published to the Marmalade store. People can then use it. It's completely cross-platform, and it allows any client to connect their game back into a cloud service. So very, very simple. So, real key things is you've got to download the Marmalade SDK. So it's available at the Marmalade.
Help system.
Once you have a GameSpark's login, you can get access to this to the docs area, can't you? So you do need to have a valid GameSpark's subscription or account to be able to download this. Again, it's a completely free download.
Yeah, sure.
And it's fully documented. So once you've downloaded it, you can follow the documentation. It shows you where to install it and away you can get going. So let's look at a simple create the in-game leaderboard, and we'll go through those steps of
the SDK.
The SDK, doing the setup and the configuration, and then joining it to our GameSpark's leaderboard. So over to the demo.
Okay, so here's the folder that I've got the project in. It looks familiar from what we've been looking at before. We've got the MKB file, which is your project, and all your data folders and stuff like that. So the key additions here, the two SDK folders.
So GameSpark's and GameSpark's underscore API.
Yeah, that's correct. So the GameSpark's folder contains the basic SDK with an MKF file. And then we have a GS underscore API folder, which contains all these little helpers and stuff that make it very easy for you to interact with the services. There's a potential that this folder might be embedded into the GameSpark folder in the future and make it even easier to use.
Okay.
But for now, there's two folders here. So, but it's still pretty easy. The next part we need to do then is actually configure this inside of our project file, which is here. So you can see we've got the sub-project section of our MKB, which says I want to use, these features.
Yep, so it's calling IWTD.
Yep. We've got the basic GameSpark SDK there. That provides the basic services.
So it's calling the URL reference. It's saying it's in a GameSpark folder and in that subfolder.
Yeah. So it's in the GameSpark folder and it's called GS SDK. So you don't need the MKF extension on there. Marmalade's smart enough to know. So the helpers as well, we've got the GS API. So this is what I was saying about we're looking to make that a bit easier in the future and actually including it all as just one include. But for now, we add the include folders to all the different types of helpers and messages and stuff.
And again, have they got any file references at them, the helpers?
Yeah, so if we go into the GS API here, you'll see there's a headers folder, and this is what we're referencing, is all of these files here.
So again, you don't need the .h extension onto any of those.
No, so that's just saying make everything in this folder available.
Yep.
And the same here, and the same here. So these need to be added to your project, and then there's a little section on the source code as well. So we've got this stuff to include all these different file types. So if you were looking to only include some of it, then you could, but I think it's probably eventually better just to have the whole lot in there.
Have a single include.
Yeah. So we'll get that updated when it is just one include. But for now, you can have a look for yourself and copy that out and use it. So that's cool. So once you've done all that, that's then the GameSpark's API is then available to your project. We're back in our main file here, but we've got an addition. We've got a couple of include files here. One called GameSpark Service and one called Authentication Request. Now these are the two things that we're going to use further down in our code. So the GameSpark service is a generally a static class. All the methods are static.
An ID and a secret pass there as well.
Yeah. So the first call we need to make is a configure where we say, well, this is our app ID and this is our app secret. These will be deleted by the time.
So these will not be live
by the time
IDs or secrets. So don't use our GameSpark services. Yeah. These are just here to show you that you do need to place those in the code.
Yeah. So and then there's the last setting here that says. Am I on the live? So you've got two different settings on GameSpark. So you've got preview and live. So preview means that you can develop your game. You get a limited number of people you can simultaneously connect, but it allows you to debug and test while your game is in live. So it makes that separation between development and production.
So it's not putting your service live. You can do a test. You can do a private beta release on Windows Phone if you wanted to.
Yeah. And when you have got a game out there and you've got people playing it, you obviously don't want to interrupt them while you're still adding new features. So this allows you to do that. You can develop in a sort of developer environment, and then when you're ready to push any updates out, you just send them live. But you need to make sure that this is set to true when you're making your final builds. Otherwise, it's going to connect to the preview.
So change the false to true.
Yes, when you're releasing. It's sometimes a good idea to have that in an if-def for release and debug, and then you don't need to remember. So the next stage is setting callbacks up. So there's an on-connect callback that basically says, when GameSparks is connected, I want to be notified so I can then do some more stuff. And again, it takes this user data that we were talking about earlier where, I want some context to the callback. So I've just set this to null again because I'm not that interested in any sort of information in this example. And then further down, the last key thing is we need to call the GameSpark service update every frame just to keep messages pumped. If you don't do that, nothing will happen.
Nothing's going to be transaction between your app and GameSpark.
Yeah. So it's just as important as the yield, S3 device yield we talked about earlier. So the callbacks are quite cool. We've got this connect callback that I send, and that basically gets called whenever the connection is successful. So what we want to do then is we want to authenticate. We want to say, right, okay, now I've connected, I want to authenticate this user. There's a number of different ways we've talked about. Facebook, you can
Twitter,
device authenticate, so you can sort of associate a user with a device into an account, which is great if you don't want people to have to go through login screens. But in this case, we're doing a username and password called, so I've said James and password. Again, it will be gone before anyone else can log into this, so you can create your own. But this is cool.
So you could have your account validated under one single account.
Yeah, sure. Yep. So if you log in with Facebook and you've already got this, you've already got an account that you signed up for in the game, it will link the two, so you won't lose any information.
So that's great for just doing that social sharing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you could have an account with your game, and then a Facebook account associated with that account as well. So then you've got the cross share in between, so that people can post the scores on Facebook. Or log in as the normal account if they don't use the Facebook, notifications.
Totally. Yeah, and it's really good. And these use, this is what I'll up here in leaderboards and stuff. That'll show me beating Lee. And once so the way that these requests work is we create them, configure them, and then send them. So you can see we create a request here. We configure it by setting things like username and passwords. All the different types of requests have sort of concrete fields in them, so it's quite easy to see what options are available to configure. You don't have to wonder or guess. It's all done for you. Yeah. And then when you're happy that you configured it, you just call the send. And again, it's this pattern with what callback and what data do I want in the callback. So if we look a bit further up, we've got the callback that happens when whenever you've authenticated, and you'll get a special type safe response as well that will contain all the fields that are possible, and then the user data. So here we're just really checking, do I have any errors in it, and then you can handle that. If there is an error, something went wrong, and then you can deal with that and sort of show to the user.
Show to the user, yeah.
Yeah. So that's all we've done here. The other part that we've done with the integration is in the player scores, and that's quite easy. We have one function that's called at the end of a game called submit to cloud, and it passes in a score. And once you call that with a score, it'll move on to the let's do the GameSparks part. But before we actually do that, I like to call is authenticated, and that checks that the service is running, it's connected, and I'm properly logged in.
Yeah.
And if all that's true, then it's okay for me to send data. Not that anything bad would happen. It was just you'd probably start getting errors, or it's a lot easier to debug if you know that you're sending stuff when everything's in a good state.
And it's just going to submit the event and the score for that event as well.
Yeah. So this one's slightly different because we're sending what's called a log event. Log events allow you to sort of create any kind of structure of parameters and values that you want. So that's what's used with leaderboards. So it means that we need to make a little bit of do a little bit of configuration here using CJSON. So all the data that's sent up to GameSparks is JSON, and all the data received. So that's why the CJSON library is used. There's documentation for it online. It's an open source library, so you can take a look at that.
Yeah, and there's various MVA courses on JSON as well. So yeah.
So what we're doing is we're creating an object. We're creating the name of the event, which is called, the field's the event key, and the name of the event scores, which is what we configured it as in the leaderboards. And then the actual field that we're setting is latest score, which is, this is my latest score, and then we're setting it to the value of score which has been passed in. And then when that's all ready to go, we call this other message called send message with data as a log event request, and then the new data we've just done. And then we also add our callback that we've talked about, and then there's a timeout of 2 seconds.
Yeah.
We can, up that to 30 seconds if you want.
Well, that's just about the connectivity to the device, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you say, okay, I want to wait 5 seconds, and if I've not heard anything, then we'll fire an event saying it's timed out. So what will happen is submit score callback will be called, but it will say it's timed out, and then you can handle that however you want. There are also other options if I do that. I haven't used them all, but actually there's only one more. It's called user data, which is that same pattern of if I want context information there, then I'll stick it in at the end, but we don't in this case. So we send that, but we also, because we're using CJSON, we've got to manage the memory. That's not something that we can help with a great deal. So once you've sent the request as a JSON object, you then call the delete.
Yeah, just declare it. Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll start leaking memory. We have this callback that I showed you there. We take it's a generic GameSparks response. So this is more on the lower level stuff, and it needs to be used when working with log events. We receive a CJSON response, and then the user data that we've talked about. We don't do anything with it in this, but you can start interrogating the JSON response. You can check if it has an error field in it. All of this stuff is in the documentation, like the JSON, schema, if there is such a thing. But all we want to do whenever we get a callback is we'd think, right, okay, now it's like, it kind of doesn't matter if it's failed because there's nothing really I can do about it at the moment. But so I just say, well, I tell you what, let's check the scores, whatever the response,
And that's just going to load the latest scores onto the device and say, this is where you are. Yeah,
so that calls the update thing here, which we then go again through this pattern of using a GameSpark service, how we authenticated. We then have another one called leaderboard request, and we're now back into this. We've got nice typed fields and stuff, so we set all the information we want. We only want 5 entries. We want the short code, which is the name of the leaderboard. Yep. We want to offset, so if you've got 1,000 people, you can say, well, give me everyone from 100 to 200 if you'd want to. And then set social, so that's the whole sort of Facebook, people in Facebook and stuff. And then we send that with, again, a response. And it's in this response that we receive the leaderboard data response object in the user data. And this is where we update our data now. We say, does it have any errors and does it have data? Which, if it has no errors and it has data, then we've received new scores. So we get the count of the scores and we iterate through getting each leaderboard data and then pulling the score out of it. And the username. So that's where we get the username, and that's where we get the user score, and that's what updates our leaderboard. So that's everything that's involved there. Should we give it a run?
Yeah, let's give it a run, see what it looks like.
Let's see what it does, shall we?
This is running in the simulator, isn't it? So it's running.
Yeah, this is running in the simulator, so you can actually see all the stuff that's going to go on in here.
Yeah, so there's the Marmalade build process behind, just compiling the project.
And you'll see there's all this. You'll see all
there's
the
authentication key to GameSparks. Yeah.
So let's do a little game. Oh yay! Woo! I'm winning Turbo Pong.
You need to increase the speed.
Yeah, I guess Well, I need to keep it easy for you.
Ugh.
So, round 3. So I've got 118. It's probably not my best score, And you see that's instantly sent the data up, pulled it back down,
and you can see in the simulator as well. You uploaded the cache data there.
Yeah. So we see this. All this stuff is the you can see this and see everything that's going on with the communication, and that'll just keep doing it. And it sorts things for you as well. Like we said, it comes back all this. You don't even need to sort the data. They do that for you. It's good. So I think that's everything to show in terms of integrating a leaderboard and just using GameSpark's APIs. I guess one more thing to make a note of is this GS API. You can look at all these different, if we look at requests, these are all the different kinds of requests that you can make to the service. So you can have a look through these. We've got buy virtual goods requests, change user details. So it's all here, all to look at, and it's in some ways the source code is a good source of documentation and that.
So thanks for that demo, James, and building a cloud backend with Marmalade. Very, very simple. Yeah. Went through how we did it in and built a leaderboard with GameSparks, joined the GameSparks leaderboard to our Marmalade, and then actually ran the game, and we got our scores.
It's definitely worth noting that there's a lot more documentation and videos on the GameSparks website. We did a very brief kind of run through of a very specific feature, but I'd advise people look on the website.
There's a great tutorial there as well, isn't there?
You get help from the forums, all that kind of stuff.
Superb. So thank you for that. So let's move back to the presentation. So that's the end of that module, really. So we just like to say, thank you for watching it. What we talked about was, why cloud services. So you've got the options of Microsoft Azure if you want to roll your own service, or if you're new to gaming, GameSparks is a great middleware to build game services very fast, as you've just seen. So again, check out both options, sign up for both services, and give them a try. So we talked about introducing GameSparks.
Yeah.
What it was, what it can do.
Yeah.
How to sign up for GameSparks, how easy it is.
Yeah.
How to design a leaderboard, so those six text boxes, just complete them and away you go. Building the GameSparks SDK, so very, very simple, and then creating the in-game leaderboard and playing the game, and it all works.
Yeah.
So thank you, and I hope you join us for the next module. So welcome back to the MVA on creating your first game with Marmalade. Just as a quick recap what we've done, in Module 1 we talked about an intro and Marmalade overview. In Module 2 we talked about building the gameplay. In Module 3 we talked about cloud services. And we're now going to move on to Module 4 and talk about monetization of your games on the Windows Phone and Windows 8 platforms. So look, Module 4 is all around monetization, and monetization is so key today, isn't it, James? If you want to be successful, you have to make money.
Money makes the world go round, doesn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say money makes the world go round, but money puts food on tables and pays for mortgages. So, the real options are today, if you're a developer, is, you can do a free app, a free to download app. Yeah. You can do an app with ads or in-app purchases, or you can do something what we call a download to own, so a DTO. So, you buy it, it's a premium app, and that's it. From an end user perspective, they paid a fee and they're going to be playing the game. Yeah. So what we're going to talk about is those various options and where we are today with the Windows and Windows Phone platform, and what the options that really work or don't work, and what some of the best practices are. Yeah. So let's start off with Microsoft. We're now a one Microsoft in terms of platforms, whether you're building for a 5-inch phone all the way up to a 133-inch all-in-one. So the benefits are using middleware such as Marmalade is that we can build for any of these platforms we want, and we've gone through those demos and showed building for Windows, building for Windows Phone, and again, just the subtle changes that are required. And the biggest one really is all around scaling, isn't it? Yeah. And we'll talk a lot more around that in the final section, in adding those finishing touches and packaging. But from a developer's perspective, it's one platform. Again, from a consumer perspective, it's really still two stores. So we're publishing content into the Windows Phone store or into the Windows 8 store. So it's really important for you to understand that, when you do get your developer account, the developer account is a one-time fee, but you do get access to both stores to be able to publish on both of those stores, completely free. We don't charge for updates, and we don't charge renewal in terms of the publication. So let's look at the Windows Store opportunity and where we are today. So we've got over 115,000 apps now in the Windows Store, and that's growing at a phenomenal rate, 134% year-on-year growth. And a few of those are yours, James. Yeah. We've got 410,000 registered developers now building for the platform, which is a 94% year-on-year growth. And we've got a 91% increase in the user base actually using these games. So this is showing that devices are being used more, Windows is becoming more popular. And we've seen that, across Europe, Windows is now #1 in 10 European countries. Italy is it's all Windows phones. You go to Italy, everyone's got Windows phones.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I was in Poland recently, and they're really high on the Windows Phone statistics as well. So, lots and lots of use of Windows Phone. And again, it's really growing with those small form factor devices, the 512 meg devices, because the price point is pretty cheap. Yeah. So people will buy them for the sons and the daughters, and lots of people want them. Again, in terms of active users running on our platform, we've got over 100 million users using our live services on a daily basis. So that's a huge growth. And that's across all our platforms. Again, what we've done with Windows Phone is done this really cool thing called mobile operator billing. I don't know if you've implemented this.
No, I don't think so.
And we've got 64 mobile billing operators now available in the world, where vendors, so carriers such as O2, Vodafone, Orange, EE, etc., AT&T, can add in mobile billing payments. So a user can pay for a game using their mobile carrier, so they don't have to pay via Microsoft Store points or via a credit card. And that's been working really, really well in those developing countries where people don't have credit cards.
Yeah.
So, using mobile billing operators is so useful for us as a vendor. Again, we've had a 50% increase in the number of people actually buying in-app purchases. So more and more people are now downloading free-to-use apps and then paying for additional content. So again, I think this is really interesting on the Windows platform, is we're seeing lots more people being prepared to buy content.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if that's a Windows legacy, but people are more prepared. So talking about a developer, we offer a lifetime developer subscription now, so you don't have to pay on an annual basis. There's no renewal. You buy once, and you've got a developer subscription for life. Again, you can pay with PayPal, so there's no issues there of not having a credit card. And again, it's one set of terms and conditions. And if you're a student, or if you're in BizSpark, so if you're in DreamSpark or BizSpark, you get a completely free developer account for life.
It makes you feel like that man there.
You've got it free forever. So if you're a student, sign up. If you're in BizSpark, sign up. It's free, so you can be dancing in the beach.
Yeah.
Again, what we're trying to do is really help you as developers with the Dev Center benefits. So if you produce and put content onto the Windows Store, you can be part of the Dev Center benefits program. And this is a rewards program. The more content you put on there, the more people download it, the better rewards you will get. So check out Dev Center rewards. So let's look at some of the key features of building a successful game. We've talked about these numerous times, but there's some real key things. These are the current state of the Windows Phone and Windows 8 marketplace in terms of advertisement apps, in-app purchase apps, and paid apps. As you can see, advertisement and in-app purchases are definitely on the increase. There's more and more games going that way. And premium apps are definitely on a decrease, and you can see that from both platforms.
So is that saying that ads have gone up in?
Yeah, so ads have basically stayed the same. There's no real increase, but definitely in-app purchases.
I mean, wow, the revenue, I'm surprised. The revenue's so high.
Revenue's so high, and there's some great examples there of games on the right-hand side, really showing, what have been successful on the platform.
Yeah.
And, some of the key things there is, the opportunity of try and buy.
Yeah, and does that come under in-app purchases?
So that comes under a buy.
Right.
It's a try and buy, so it's a premium app when it comes down to it. So, another key thing is about advertisement. And we touched on advertisement earlier on, and it's about, providing those advertisement bases. So partners such as AdDuplex, which we showed the demo of, is being able to add those ads into your app and ensure that you've got a 99% fill rate. Because if you can get the highest fill rate possible, you're going to get revenue.
More money,
if you're just serving blank ads, you're not going to make any revenue. So, think about how you're going to put ads into your games, and, we've covered that in these sessions.
Yeah.
Again, think about in-app purchase best practice. And there's some really key things there that stand out. So number one is, we allow third-party payment gateways. So you can pay with PayPal, Alipay. We allow, actual Microsoft Store tokens, so, Microsoft points.
So with the third-party stuff, you don't take any...
And we don't take any revenue, yes. So if you're using Alipay or PayPal as a third-party payment gateway,
pretty flexible, isn't it?
You can get 100% revenue. Are you doing that? Are you getting 100% revenue? Well, you're just paying your PayPal fees. You're smiling. You must be doing something on that. But, there's lots and lots of opportunity to make revenue from the store and use these best practices to make your games really shine. Again, in terms of download to own, we've found this amazing success that 82% of the top 50 games in our store use try and buy. And you might say, well, is try and buy really useful? It really is, because we're the only platform to offer try and buy today. It's simply a flag in the publishing account where you actually say, you want this to be a trial offer. You set some logic in that trial offer to say, in my game, I want the trial to last 1 day, 1 week, 4 plays, 3 lives. And then once that logic is kicked in, the app will then prompt the user to buy the game. And we've actually talked about that earlier on. Sure. So, we've got demos of that in day one. And this is a real successful move to make sure that your game is seen. The problem with paid apps is that there's that risk to the end user. Does it look pretty enough?
There's been a few times when I've have a few quid on that, and you get it, and then you let down quite badly.
And then you let down,
I can't
or
get a refund now.
You're a bit unsure because the actual screenshot doesn't look good, or the advertisement.
Hurt developers in the sense that developers have to reduce their price to such a point where it's a throwaway purchase anyway, no matter how good the software is.
Yeah, when we're going,
people won't take that risk. Whereas try and buy, you can say, well, I'll have a go, and then you think, wow, that is worth like $20 or whatever. In if it's a productivity app or something.
Yeah. But even as a game, we go into Costa and we spend £2 on a Costa, well £3.65, and how much is a general app these days? £1.50, £1.60. So, we want to make your apps worth that value. You might have spent 12 weeks, you may have spent a year building those games. So, think about how you're going to get people to actually click that buy button and make those revenue changes. Again, what's the best practice for in-market? So once you've got your games there, how do you get people to download them? How do you make them viral? So number one for us is about localization and reach. If you look at the Windows Phone stores, they're all over the world, 191 stores. And what's really important is about those different languages that people use within those stores. In terms of a game, if you build a game, you don't really need to localize it, really, unless you've got, text on the screen, menu bar buttons. Yeah. But if you start using graphics a lot more, simple representations of a play, a pause, a reload, that helps you in that terms of this localization issue. And as you can see, over 75% of Windows Phone apps are downloaded in other languages than English. And this is about these developing countries and these areas where mobile phone, the cost of a mobile phone is now pretty cheap. So they're going out and buying these Nokia Lumia 520, 620, 635 devices that are in the £30 to £60 range, or $60 to $70. So again, think about how you can localize. Again, think about how you're publishing. And there's this really interesting thing about, the cost of how much something costs across different countries. So for example, $1 in the US isn't the same as $1 in India.
No, sure.
So what we've done with our stores is allowed you to actually do flexible price indexing. Yeah. So for example, you can charge, in the example here, we're charging €2.99 in Andorra, but in Armenia we're charging $3.99 US. So we've got a flexible pricing option. That could be the same pricing structure, so it could be the same currency, but just at different tiered rates, depending on where you want to publish that game to. And that will help you, from a local user's perspective in that country. They will understand that, this is a good value app, and it's not creating disparity across countries.
No.
So again, think about that. Again, another key thing is this mobile biller operator. 83% in developing countries, so such as Mexico, places like that, where are actually done with the mobile billing operator.
Wow.
I know a few people in the UK are actually using it now because they've given the phones to the children and devices, and it's a great way of them managing that billing operator. How much they're going to be spending. Yeah. So it really does work. Again, think about those countries that don't have high credit card penetrations, because not everybody has a credit card.
No, sure.
So what's the best practice of engagement and retention? So people are downloading your games, people are using your games. How do you keep them? How do you make it sticky? And this is really where, we've got the opportunity of things like cross-promotion. So I know that we've talked about this in terms of our ad fill, is cross-promoting games that are already in our portfolio. Yeah. So that when your user is playing, you've got a 99% ad fill rate. Yeah. And then every so many hundred, one of your games gets published. So you can see, there's cross-promotion. Again, think about working with publishers or partners in terms of cross-promoting their games. Another key one is about player recruitment. Yeah. How do you recruit players to play that game? How, do you do social connectors such as Twitter and Facebook and share that content across so people then say, I've just played Super Pong and scored, and I'm going to beat James, and put it on Facebook, and all my friends then play Super Pong to try and beat me. Again, think about how you can actually use these referral mechanisms to reward the players of your games. So if somebody does refer you, do they get in-app purchase credits? Do they get so many coins? Do they receive an achievement?
Well, that was interesting. That's something we've done in Flip Sports on.
Okay. So tell us a bit about that. Yeah.
So if I, we give every user who logs in a referral code. We can say, here's my referral code. And if you sign up with that, it will give us both, in-app virtual currency that we can use to play.
So that's a great way of, player recruitment. You're referring somebody. The actual person who's referred them has got some credit.
And it's really easy to do, if using something like GameSpark. So you can take advantage of all this engagement and retention that I guess you need to do nowadays to make anything from it. And it's dead easy.
Superb,
And 5 minutes later, you've got it.
The other key things is live tiles. So a live tile in a Windows device, so whether it's a Windows Phone or a Windows 8 device, is an advert. It's an advert that's demonstrating your game, your achievements, how you're beating James playing Super Pong, which I will do. But again, from a user perspective, so they could be showing their device to a friend or to a colleague, and they see that tile and they go, that looks an interesting game. That looks like nice content. Oh, I didn't know you were playing with James.
Yeah.
So again, it's a great way of creating extra use of the game. And again, the most important one. Sorry.
I was just going to say engagement and retention. Something else that we did on Flip Sports that just occurred to me with the live tiles. It's slightly different, but it was tap to send. So if we're sat in the same room, I noticed something on. We were trying to play a game about a year ago, and we were trying to go into I think it was Game Centre or something, and then I was trying to find my friend, and he was trying to find me, and we spent 20 minutes and couldn't get a game going, and we're thinking, well, okay, this could be really cool, tap to send. So you sat in the same room, you want to play a game against each other. I'll tell you what, you press the button and then you tap your phones together.
So it uses the NFC?
Yeah, NFC. You've linked up. You've just got a new user into the game, so you both get credits for it. You've got live.
So you've got
tiles,
referral, you've got your live tiles.
Yeah, and it all ties together really well.
Superb. And then, what that does is drives user feedback.
Yeah.
So, they will be sat in that pub or wherever they are, playing that game, and they'll probably give it a 4 or 5 star rating because, they've been able to do that quickly, efficiently.
How many times is it like, have you tried this out? Oh, I'll give it a try later. And how many times have you said that and actually gone and tried it later?
Yeah, so I call that the pub syndrome.
Yeah.
So, we're all sat in the pub, we all pull out our devices, and we've all got different devices, and we say, have you seen X? And everybody immediately goes to the store, and if X isn't in their store, nobody plays that game.
It's gone,
It's gone. That moment is gone. So again, think about how you're going to do that. Think about how you're going to ask for feedback. Don't ask for feedback too much.
No.
Our best practice guidance is ask for feedback every 10 plays. So once a user's done 10 goes, ask for feedback or prompt for feedback. Again, the worst thing that can happen for you is getting poor feedback in the store because there's 3 things that sell your game. It's how pretty it looks. So what's the graphics like? What's the image like? What the user feedback is like? And what that rating is. So think about that when you're doing, when you're prompting for ratings. Okay, so we've said that asking for feedback on a regular basis is really bad.
Yeah.
It's not good practice. But one of the things that we've done now with the Windows Phone Store is the ability to respond to reviews.
Yeah.
That's becoming really important. And this is a great feature where if you do get bad feedback, you can actually go back and ask the person, why?
Yeah.
And then again, be it as a developer, be able to address the why.
Yeah.
And again, this helps so much in terms of those negative reviews being turned back into positive reviews after you've made an update or a change. So definitely.
So do you find a lot of people will tweak their scores after getting feedback?
Yeah, so definitely, I think one of the key things that we've done now with the Windows Phone Store as well is being able to actually put on the review what device is being used. For example, you would know that Justin potentially would be using a Lumia 1020, for example. And Lara could be using, I don't know, a HTC 8X and have an issue.
Yeah.
So you could be able to identify from those reviews if there was a device issue rather than a development issue. And then you could say, okay, I know that this device is having lots of poor feedback.
Yeah.
So have I built my app for a 512 meg device properly?
See, that's something quite frustrating that we've experienced where you might have an app out there and people will say, oh, it crashes.
But you have no idea.
It could be one of 100 devices, and you're not going to have 100 devices to test on.
Exactly. So what we've now done is tag those devices to the user feedback.
And is that just visible to the developer?
That's visible to anyone. So again, as a consumer, when you look at an app in a store, you can see that the person with the same phone as me loves this game or hates this game.
Yeah.
So again, it's a great bit of feedback from both the consumer perspective and the developer perspective. So again, here's the actual example of talking about this. So this is a user review of Runtastic Pro. You can see Tim is actually using a Nokia Lumia 1020, and the person who's registered as user is using a HTC 8X. But again, they both reviewed the app as 5-star.
Yeah.
So straight away, you know that what device that person's using. You get a monitor, and then you get the crash debug in your dashboard.
Yeah.
And you can actually see, there's a definite, performance here. It's crashing on this section. I can go into debug. I can look at those codes and get that issue fixed. One of the other things that we've done is this whole personalised recommendations of collections. So on your Windows Phone, you're now actually referred to what your friends like and what you've previously liked.
Okay.
So again, you've got dedicated referrals of great games or great content that might be of interest to you. And again, we've got the whole opportunity now of universal apps. So this is the ability to publish a Windows Phone game, a Windows 8 game, and join those in the store as a universal. And then this is presented to the end user as a download once app. So you've got the little logo. You can set this. You can be very flexible with it. So you can have it as, I bought it on one platform, it's free on the other.
Yeah.
It's free on both platforms, or it's a paid app on both platforms at different prices.
Okay.
So again, completely flexible to how you, as a developer, want to sell your games.
Very cool.
But from a consumer perspective, it's clearly identified with a logo of a PC and a phone of being universal. So let's look at some of the resources. You know, we've talked about this throughout the day. bizspark.com, madewithmarmalade.com/Windows, the Dev Center and the Dev Center benefits are all great resources for you as developers to get started and building awesome games on the Windows and Windows Phone platform. So that's our module done for today. I hope you found that interesting as an overview to where monetization aspects are of the platform, and I hope you join us for the next module. So welcome back to the MVA, creating your first Marmalade game. Just to do as a quick recap, we've covered Module 1, which was an intro and a Marmalade overview. Module 2 was building the game. Module 3, which is cloud services. Module 4 on monetization, and we're now moving on to Module 5, creating Marmalade extensions. So in Module 5, we're going to be talking specifically about building Marmalade extensions. So let's start off with an intro of what a Marmalade extension is. So module overview is what are Marmalade extensions, examples of Marmalade extensions, and building a Marmalade extension for both Windows 8 and for Windows Phone. So what are Marmalade extensions, James?
So Marmalade extensions are, additional pieces of code and sub-projects that you can add to your Marmalade project to sort of get access to the native system. And funnily enough, Marmalade itself and its middleware APIs are in essence extensions. So you've got that base platform, which is the Marmalade.
So these are includes, aren't they, as such?
Yeah, and they're kind of, we were talking about the loader and your projects and stuff earlier, and they're kind of built at that level. So so an extension can be compiled with your native code, such as if it was iOS, it would be Objective-C. If it was Windows, you'd have C# bits and sort of direct access to the system libraries and frameworks that are made available. And then the extension library actually places code on top of that creates this interface between native code and then and the sort of S3E Marmalade sort of ecosystem, I guess.
Okay, we can talk about that in a bit more detail in a second.
Yeah, sure.
But, from a developer's perspective, you can build your own extensions and host them on GitHub, partner websites.
Yeah. Or just internal ones if you had a bit of bespoke software or something, the library that you were using that was a native to a device and you needed it to use it within Marmalade, you could do it quite easily.
Superb. So in terms of extensions in our project, we're using the GameSpark extension.
Yeah, that's
we're
an
using
example,
the AdWords extension from AdDuplex.
Yeah, I think AdDuplex is a very good example because it does use C# and I think it's got some elements of XAML in there as well, and you're drawing that into a cross-platform.
Excellent.
project.
So let's look at what the Marmalade extension is. So this is really how, from an architectural standpoint,
Yeah,
Marmalade sits.
Yeah, I've jumped the gun a bit on there. But
That's why I tried to slow you down. I thought, we're going to cover this in a bit more detail. So talk us through these architectural layouts of where the EDK actually sits.
Yeah, so like I was saying, the extensions sit at the same level as that base, the base of the Marmalade system, and a lot of the Marmalade system itself is made up of extensions, and it's a kind of set of methods and ways and I guess protocols of being able to translate a native libraries and calls into something that's cross-platform.
So it is what it says on the tin. It's an extension to Marmalade. So you're adding some
like
features to it.
Additional block, and it's really easy to pull in, and it handles stuff like if we decide that we want to use I don't know, tap to send, that's a NSC tap to send, and we have an extension for that, and then you build your game for iOS, which of course doesn't have it, then it will handle gracefully that fact that doesn't exist on that platform, and you can say in your code, is this extension available to me, and write your game logic accordingly.
Excellent.
But that's the only thing you need to check is it available, because there are other extensions that might be supported on Windows Phone, iOS, but not Android. So you don't want to have to write, am I on iOS and Android? And
so lots of if-def. If-def is really key, isn't it? It's saying, what platform am I running on?
Yeah, and then there's nothing to say in the future that, that their platform then might add support for that and the extension updated accordingly. And you can then just update the extension and it'll just work in your game, because your game only cares about whether the extension's available or not, not whether it's on the platform. So
exactly, yeah.
Keeps that knowledge away from
So it does the isolation, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure.
So, here's a quick, a big summary slide of what an extension actually is in more detail. There's lots and lots of documentation, again, on docs.marmalade.com.
Yeah.
So, if you are a developer, you can actually, have a good read, a good understanding of how to start and how to build these. And again, Marmalade are open for people contributing to their GitHub repository with new extensions.
Yeah.
So this is a bit more of an overview of how extensions are built in terms of the Marmalade subsystem. You've got the GLS X Platform API, and then extensions are in line with that. And again, you can write extensions in any technology that talks to your application. So you're not just limited to C++, you can use C#, you could use Java potentially.
Yeah.
Again, it's just about how you can encapsulate those extensions into the SDK.
Yeah.
So let's do a quick example of what Marmalade extensions are. These are some of the Marmalade extensions that ship with Marmalade as standard. So as we said, we're using the S3 add duplex within our game.
Yeah.
Again, we've talked about those store billing options because we call them store billing APIs and in the EDK within the game to make that trial to buy purchase. And we'll talk about that in the final module.
And this is kind of an example of how Marmalade is structured. We've used the Windows Store billing and stuff, and you can see here that it is just an extension. So we're using it as part of Marmalade, but it is part of Marmalade, but as an extension you choose to use or not. So interestingly, all Marmalade is built up with all these extensions, but you're not always wrapping every single one up in your code. So from a perspective of building a game, it's not going to be massive that has every bit of functionality under the world. It'll only have whatever you choose to
add in.
use within your project.
And what's required for the game that you're building.
Yeah.
And these are some of the specific Windows ones which are available. There's hundreds available for different platforms as well. So we've just tried to call out here what are specific to the Windows platform. So now let's look at a demo of Marmalade extension for a developer's perspective. Where are those located in the Marmalade subfolders and how to get started?
Okay, so let's see where the Marmalade extension folder is. So I'm going to navigate. I've got Marmalade installed in the default place, so that will be the C Marmalade. And if you've got multiple versions installed, you'll see them in directories labeled after their version. So we enter 7.4, and we can see we've got an extensions folder here. So if we double click on this, so you can see these are all the things that come with the Marmalade SDK.
Yep.
Most of them are prepended with S3. You can take a look at all of these. You can go into them and have a look at the source code. So let's take a look at the Facebook one, for example. So there's an awful lot of these files here which are generated per platform. But just looking at it, you can see there's Android, there's iPhone, there's Windows Phone 8, Windows Store 8.1. So this plugin supports a lot of platforms. You can see that. Which is why it's an interesting one to look at, because it is, cross-platform. It is very, it's very complicated, and there's a lot of stuff in there. So we can look in the source code folder, which is where all the source code's kept. Funny enough, and again, it's sort of
platform specific, isn't it?
Yeah. So if we have a look in Windows Phone 8, and straight away we can start seeing, the local platform, the native platform stuff that we've got. So we've got a C# file there. Got C++ files, and we've got some auto-generated stuff. Just to highlight, if we look at Android, for example, you get a Java file, and likewise, the iPhone thing, you get an Objective-C file. So this is where all the the platform-specific stuff is.
So again, from a developer, it's the natural language of the platform.
Yeah.
And again, from a developer's perspective, when you're actually adding these extensions, do you need to add the extension folder for every so for every platform you're using?
No, so when we'll have a go at going through the process of generating one in a bit, but that's all done by Marmalade. So the structure, it's a complicated structure, and that's all handled by.
So again, it's all handled by Marmalade. From the developer.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about which platforms. You just know you want that plugin.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Marmalade extensions, James. You've just showed us a quick example of where they're located and how they're used, and again, that issue of being in the actual developer's main languages. So if they're developing for Android, it's Java.
Yeah.
If they're developing for Windows, it's C#. And if they're developing for iOS, it's Objective-C.
Yeah.
So again, there's no real learning skills required for developers of those native platforms. So what are the big key things about the Marmalade toolset? Is there anything specific regarding using a Marmalade extension?
Not particularly. I mean, you've got to take into account that if you're using any external resources, so if it's an Android one, for example, jar files, you'd need to make sure that those are brought into your project, because it's not magic. You still do need to supply any resources that it relies on and stuff. But I think that's really the only thing that Marmalade can't do for you automatically, and you have to manage that yourself. But
okay, we'll talk about that a bit later in one of the demonstrations,
sure.
won't we?
Yeah.
So from a Marmalade perspective, they have a dedicated GitHub repository. So if you look at github.com/Marmalade, and they have a lot of these SDKs and EDKs, they're available to download and install as additional options. And again, the community is getting really involved in this. So if you're a developer and you're building something bespoke and you think that other people may want to use it, please start submitting or creating forks of the existing EDKs and get your name known within the community. So let's talk about building an extension for Windows 8 and Windows Phone. I think it's really important, from our perspective. I'm from Microsoft, and we're talking about Windows 8 and Windows Phone within this course. So let's look at, the key things that we've been using. So what does the Marmalade extension kit actually offer?
So the Marmalade extension development kit is a set of tools that Marmalade provides to help you build these extensions that we've discussed. It creates the structure of the folder. It creates the auto-generated source code that does support, provides you with support for things like, does this extension exist on this platform? Is it available? Is it loaded? So all that kind of boilerplate that would be very difficult and error prone to generate is all done for you with the extension development kit.
Exactly. One of the key things about Marmalade is they're supporting the primary platforms at the moment, so iOS, Windows, Android, Windows 8, Windows Phone, etc. But there's lots of new platforms arriving on the market, so Ula, Ruko, and this is the opportunity of the EDK for developers to start building extensions for those specific platforms that they're using. So again, once that becomes established, or in a GitHub repository, that is available for developers to use. And more importantly, as a developer, it gives you more eyeballs on your game and more platforms to actually get your game to. So again, start thinking about how you can go cross-platform. So now we're going to do a demo on the Marmalade extension and building those Marmalade extensions for Windows. We're going to specifically focus on Windows Phone, but we'll talk about how to do it for Windows 8 as well.
Yeah.
So over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Lee. So I've just taken the I'll show you where it is. There's an example that comes with Marmalade under their examples folder. So we go back into here, we look at examples, EDK, and then we've got 3. So we're going to use this message box example that comes here. So I've just copied these folders out into another folder with all the dependencies for it that it relies on, such as the example resources. So let's start off looking at the extension. This extension is a very simple message box extension that's just going to pop up a little box that says hello world.
So it's a message box that's going to pop up and say a message with an OK button.
Yeah, and it uses native code, so it's native C# stuff. So every time you want to create an extension, you have to define the interface using what's called an S4E file. So you see this is called messagebox.s4e, and here's what's in the contents of it. The documentation on S4E files, again, is on the Marmalade website. It goes into a lot more detail than we can go into here. But you can kind of see it's quite sort of clear what you're doing. It's a C-type syntax. It's parsed by a C parser. You've got your includes and stuff. And then the actual key part is this line here that we define our interface. And you'll see it's standard C++. The interface has to be standard C++ because that's the cross-platform part of it. So you can't have anything that's related to a specific platform in here. So we've created something very simple. It has a result. You pass in a const char for the title, a const char for text, and this is the return. This is the default return value. So on a platform like, if we only build this for Windows Phone 8 and you try and use the extension on iPhone, it will just return an error saying, not on this platform.
Not on this platform, yeah.
Which is quite cool. So when you've created this file, it's very easy. You wouldn't normally have all of these folders here. You can do it. I'll show you quickly. You can do it with just an empty folder with an S4E. You right click and then you would select Windows Phone 8 extension. You'll notice here there's also Windows Store 8 and Windows Store 8.1. So you select whichever one's appropriate for what you're doing. And you'll see straight away it's created a very similar.
So that's gone away, wrapped all those up, created MKB files for each one,
Yeah. So that's just sort of showing you that it does work in an empty folder, but we've already got source code and stuff, so we're going to use it within what we've already got. So we'll see that it's added the 2 MKB files. So that's pretty cool. Let's have a look in the source folder here. So you'll see in the source folder there's a whole load of stuff for all the different platforms there. You'll see that we've got Windows Phone 8, Windows Store 8, Windows Store 8.1. There's also Windows, which is Windows Desktop.
So that's an X32.
Yeah.
Yep.
OS 10, iPhone, Android. There's some generic code in there, which is like boilerplate, which is Marmalade specific, and then the header files as well. Let's have a look in the Windows Phone 8 folder. We can see that we've got all of these. We've got all the files here that have been generated for us. The shim files are a boilerplate again. So I guess the one that we're interested in here are these two files. So let's have a look in the C# file. So we've got loads of auto-generated stuff.
And this has all been generated by Marmalade itself, hasn't
Yeah.
it? So, you know, as a developer, you've not had to do any of this. It was just a right-click build, build for the platform you want.
Yeah. So all of this stuff, okay. And then this is the part of the code that is actually ours. You know, this one line here, pretty much. So this has been generated it's originally generated as a stub with nothing in it, and you just stick that line in there. That's a Windows Phone 8 API call, messagebox.show, and you're passing in the title and the text. So that's pretty cool there. You could be asking, you know, how does that know to turn a const char into a Objective-C string? So that's the other file that we'll take a look at. Again, you can explore these and take a look yourself.
And again, you can modify these. These are just pure samples that are within the Marmalade subfolder.
So we've got a platform folder that again does all the sort of, it's the C++ side of it. So if you've got C++ stuff you want to write that goes with the platform, then you can do that. So you'll see here, this is where you would do all your marshalling of data. For us, Marmalade knows how to do and handle strings automatically. So it'll turn a const char into a platform string, and then it will call the
message box.
Yeah, message box thing in the C# folder. So that's cool. But if you're doing your own stuff with more complex types, you'd have to modify code in here if it's your own pointer data types or whatever, and you'll need to manually marshal that data across, and also when doing returns and stuff, then this is the file where you would do it. So you can use, you can still use things like the Windows runtime libraries and that within here. It's just C++, so it's the layer that you would take, because it also supports, you know, vanilla C++, which is what your interface is defined in. Is how you take your vanilla interface data and turn it into what ever C# can do. But also, I mean, you don't need to necessarily use the C# side. You could do, if it was possible to do it all in C++, you could do it all in C++, and you would never have to call Objective-C. Yeah, we could remove that call and access the API with the appropriate C++ call.
Yeah.
So
it allows you as a developer to use the skills
that
you're good at.
Yeah. So you know, there'll be a lot of documentation out there on the MSDN, I guess, about, you know, getting from C++ and marshalling data and all that kind of stuff.
So msdn.microsoft.com has lots of resources in terms of C#, C++ samples. So there's
nothing, you know, there's nothing Marmalade specific about this. It's how you do it in the new Windows runtime. So that's a very quick look at the source code there. You can see this is a very simple example. You can get much more complex. So let's build it, shall we?
So how do we take this now to a Windows Phone emulator, for example?
Yeah, right. So we need to actually build the code, and you'll notice there's an MKB file there. There's also MKFs, which are like sub-projects, and we don't need to worry about them. We just need to worry about the MKB for the particular platform that we want.
So we know that the right button context menu works on this, don't we, for build?
We do, yeah. So we right-click, and you get a big menu again, and then you'll see at the top it says build. That's all you need to click, and Marmalade will know exactly what to do.
So Marmalade now is going away, building that actual solution for a Windows Phone 8.
Yeah.
And
so it's generating Visual Studio Solutions.
So
it's then
your Visual
going
Studio
to build
output.
them, and then it's, you know, it's just doing loads of stuff that, you know, would take you probably ages to do if you used to do it manually. So we'll just wait for this to build as it's doing it.
So once this is built, it's actually going to create us a real Visual Studio solution, isn't it? So we can actually open that solution in Visual Studio itself.
Yeah, so it's created a folder here where it's going to contain all this build stuff. I mean, I guess you can take a look into it if you like, but realistically, it's kind of all handled by the build system. So
This is a real Visual Studio project, isn't it?
yeah, so you'll see we've got the solution file there, and we've got, you know, all the other stuff you'd normally see, like VX project and stuff. So now that step's completed, it's actually created, you know, a lib folder here, Windows Phone 8, and you'll have, you know, debug and release versions of all the DLLs and lib files and stuff that, you know, Windows runtime components, I think the phrase is for Windows Phone 8. But, you know, you can look at Android, and it'll have shared objects and jar files, everything that you need, or Marmalade needs to load that library up when we
So
want
that's
to use
literally
it.
built as a library for every single platform, hasn't it? Just by pressing that build.
Yeah. And amazingly, you can, if you were to do a iOS library, you'd have to build it on a Mac, but then you could import that into a project on a PC, and you could produce IPAs on the PC that, you know, using native iOS functionality. Yeah, which is pretty cool. So test app is our test is the test app that comes with a sample, as it's creatively named. So let's create a Windows Phone 8 project for it.
So again, we right-clicked and went to open with Visual Studio, and it's now building as a Visual Studio solution of the Windows Phone, isn't it?
Yeah, and this references the extension that we've just built. I'll show you the MKB file. There's the MKB file. Let's have a look at it in Notepad instead. So this one's very simple. You'll see that it references the extension we've just built.
Yep.
We reference some Marmalade example resources that it needs, and we add the messagebox.cpp
So
file.
again, they're just UNC references to the locations of where extensions and Marmalade example is, isn't it?
Yeah. So we can follow this. You know, let's you know, that's the reference in our extension. So let's have a look where the main file is. So it's created quite a few projects here for us. So let's find the source folder. And take a quick look. So it's actually more complex than it needs to be, just to show a text box, but it does quite a cool thing because it responds to touches. So here's all the code here. Let's take a look at our main as we normally do. So we're enabling our touch here, registering for touch handlers or button events, depending on if we're, you know, running on a touch device or something with a mouse. And then we're back in that loop again. And all we're doing is running around saying it's a, you know, message box test application. So that's quite cool. But the real key part is these message boxes here.
And they're the actual messages that are going to appear on the screen, aren't they?
And they look familiar, don't they? They look like the code in the other example, and I think that's just duplicated based on whether you're using touches or, you know, toggling it. So so we're calling our, you know, our API, which takes the const char and another const char, and that's it. You know, there'll be an include to that up here, where we're including the correct thing for the extension.
The reference, yeah.
And we've referenced it in the MKB, and that's all you need to do. So if we give that a run,
choose the emulator, yeah.
in the emulator.
So run this on a Windows 8.1 512 meg device.
And we'll just give it a little bit of time to
By the Hyper-V.
wake up.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think enough people have got Turbo Pong yet for me to get a new laptop. So just have to wait for it. Let's have a.
So what this is doing is actually firing up the emulator now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And doing the install of the OS, and then it's going to deploy the application. So there's the OS applications now being deployed.
See, you've got all the log information down there and stuff. So let's wait for the magic. Wait for the magic sign. So a Marmalade application. That's really cool. So let's start clicking, and it pops up with that message box.
And if we wish, it's message number 2. So if we want to change it, we can just go in and change those codes.
Number 1. And that's, you know, that's these are our 2 messages. So it is actually responding to, you know, the text that we pass it, and it is displaying it on the screen, which is very cool. And that's and we've seen that one line of code in C# that does it. You know, so we're going all the way from cross-platform C++ all the way through this extension library and all the way down to C# code, and it sits nicely side by side.
So an excellent demo, James. And let's go back to the slides. So we just saw a demo there from James on building a Marmalade extension. So that's the end of the module. You know, so what did we do in this module? We talked about what Marmalade extensions are. We showed you an example of Marmalade extensions, and then we showed you how to build a Marmalade extension for Windows 8 and Windows Phone. So a very simple process, and we hope you enjoyed this module and you'll join us for the final module in a while. Thank you. So welcome back to the MVA of creating your first Marmalade game. So we're on our final module of the day, and we hope you've enjoyed the course so far. So let's just do a quick review of what we've seen so far. So on Module 1, we did an intro and a Marmalade overview. Module 2, we talked about building the game and talked about the gameplay. Module 3, we talked about cloud services, so the ability of Windows Azure and of GameSparks. Module 4, we talked about monetization, so how to make the best out of your games. Module 5, we talked about creating those Marmalade extensions and adding extensions into a Windows Phone and Windows 8 game. And our final module is all about packaging and adding those finishing touches. So let's get on with the module. So Module 6, packaging and finishing touches. What we're going to talk about today is try and buy, ads in games, packaging the game, and then really publishing the game to the Windows Phone store and Windows 8 stores. So try and buy is an important aspect of any game, isn't it, James?
Yeah, we've had a good few discussions about this so far today, and yeah, it's definitely one of the good ways to go. People can try your game without having to stump up the money straight away, and if they really like it, then great. And
we showed an example earlier on of Turbo Pong with the try and buy in there.
And you as a developer, as you said earlier, can decide if that's 10 goes, 10 weeks, 1 day. It's a really good way of
monetizing your game and getting people to download it and use it. So yeah, try and buy definitely works. 82% of the top 50 games on the Windows Store use try and buy. So let's go to a demo now of actually showing try and buy within Turbo Pong. We'll talk you through how it was constructed, what the code was, and what the actual features do.
So here we are back in the project we discussed earlier. We're in the main function, and I'm going to highlight this line of code here. So this is the stage when we're loading resources. So we're setting the game up. We've configured GameSparks, and now we're doing the Windows Store billing. So this is the one API call that you need to call to see whether your app is in trial mode or not, and that's it. And all we're doing is passing the address of a boolean in there that this function will then populate with true or false. That's all we need to do to see whether our game is in trial.
And that's just seeing if, from a Windows Store perspective, when you logged into dev.windows.com, that you've selected in the dashboard trial option, and that's just looking at that tick box and saying, was it enabled, was it not enabled?
Yeah, and whether the player who's playing it now has actually purchased it, and whether they have the license for the full version.
For the full version,
And it will return obviously false if they haven't, and it will return true if they haven't and they are in trial mode, and false if they have purchased it and they are no longer in trial mode. So that's cool, but we still need to implement the logic around what we do. So in this game, what the trial unlock does is remove the ads. So I believe part of the certification is you must do something when someone unlocks a full game. You can't
just have trial.
Yeah. So what we do is remove the ads because we think, well, thank you very much, which is pretty cool. So let's have a quick look up here in the resume callback. We've got a function called setAdsVisible, and we'll discuss the ads in a little bit and how they all work. But it's quite easy to see from here that the ads are only visible when isTrial is true. So the isTrial is, again, peak declaration. Just returns that flag that we've set.
If game trial.
So so we show and hide the ads here. We do it in our resume callback, and just before we check it, we also before we set the ads visible, we just update from the store to make sure what we're in. So I think the advice was given that you shouldn't call S3E Windows Store billing as trial every frame. It should be cached by you, the user, and then used, because you don't want to keep constantly sending.
And all those details are on msdn.microsoft.com under the developer resources.
So we've got a little bit more up here around the trial mode, only a tiny bit, and it's this method I showed before, and a static variable that game is trial, and that's going to be available throughout the game, and that's pretty much it for the trial mode.
So very, very simple to add. In terms of lines, it's probably 20 lines of code.
One more that I did forget was the header files, but that's
so you're just basically including both those S3E functions of Windows billing, Windows Store billing, and that really just allows the Windows Phone or Windows 8 to ensure that if true flag is set,
Yeah.
it can see it. Yeah,
And that's that.
Thank you. So we talked about adding a try and buy there, so now let's move on to ads in games. So as we all know, and looking at the monetization module in number 4, monetization is really key, and ads are a key way of making revenue within your game.
Well, they're it's the top 2 bits, aren't they, of that little chart you have?
They are. So can I ask you about the games that Lemon Moose are doing? Do you see ads being a primary income from from the publishing games that you've published, or?
Well, we've Lemon Moose Games. We haven't got any ads ourselves. We've done ads for our clients, and some of those have said they've done quite well. I haven't got specific figures or anything.
I don't need to discuss figures, but you're smiling, so people are happy.
Yeah. I think they've done well. So it's definitely worth the the amount of time that it takes you to integrate them.
And as we showed earlier on, Turbo Pong has ads. We just talked about how that ad feature is actually done as a trial and buy. So let's go into a demo of how to add ads into your game.
So again, we're back in the start of the main function. You can see we've left off where we were last time, but this time we'll focus on the add duplex stuff. So again, in the initialization stuff, we need to register add duplex. So I've wrapped that all up in a nice function called register add duplex. So let's go to that definition, shall we? And here it is in the same main file, just a bit further up. So it's very easy to register add duplex. We discussed previously that you get a add duplex ID. We do something where we pull it out of the config instead of baking it into your source code, so that's quite cool. It's under the add duplex section of the ICF, and the key is add duplex ID, and we're going to read that into the character array here, that we can then pass into the creation part of add duplex. So once we've got this setting, you'll notice I've got is it a successful test there. So you could put an else statement and a message to warn you if you're running it and it can't find your configuration setting. I've not, for simplicity. We run 2 S3 add duplex register functions. These are similar to pretty much all the other callback functions we've seen so far. We've got the callbacks here. Let's have a look at the peak definition again. And you see all the other different types of callbacks that add duplex offers, and they've even commented them how, with what you need. So we're just going to have 2 of them here. We're going to have when add duplex is being created, and when it's loaded an add, and we've got 2 callbacks for each event, and we're not passing any data in. Once we've set that up, we then register with our ID, and that will go off and do some stuff in the background, and then when it's happy and comes back, it will return to the init callback, which is what we set there. And then from that, the system data, it's the callback signature is the same on all the S3 things, so we get a void star system data and a void star user data. In this particular case, system data has been set to the add duplex handle, so we need to cast it into the correct data format for us, to use.
To handle it, yeah.
And then we detect whether we're in trial. We've looked at that before, because we don't want to show ads if we're,
If you've just paid for it.
If you just paid for it, I don't think users would be too happy. So that's cool. So we are in trial mode, so we want to show our ads. So we call add duplex show, and we pass in the handle that we've just received. This handle is key to everything that you now do to interact with the ads. It's kind of how it links it to your stuff. So we call show, and then what we do is there's a lot of properties that you can set for the add duplex, the way it's displayed.
So this is basically the display size and where the actual ad is going to be placed on the device, and what size it's going to be. So I can see there you've got set sizes. And
so what I'm saying, I want it vertically aligned and vertically aligned top. So that's
292 by 60.
Yeah. So what it said is I want to set the vertical alignment. And I want to set it to top, and here it's saying I want to set the size, and I want to set it to 296 by.
And again, this has been designed for Windows Phone, so that's a perfect size to fit along the top of a Windows Phone screen, and not actually encroach on the gaming areas.
And you can do nice things like the size of this, so you can shift the UI around if the ads there and stuff. And then I've just put a little log statement to say it's there, part of debugging and stuff. So the last thing that we have is the add duplex loaded callback. And this is called every time that you get a new ad and it's loaded on the screen. So, I mean, you can put your own logic in there if it's important for you to know when a new ad's loaded or whatever. You can put the code there. I've just put a login statement. I found it useful for debugging and testing to see when these things are coming through. So that's everything really. There's nothing in the main loop that you need to do. It all just runs in the background and keeps itself going and keeps populating you with ads as it does.
So in terms of, we were talking earlier around in Module 4 of that cross promotion, so the ability to have your own ads within the ads that are being served, and that's actually handled from the Ad Duplex management console. So that's an interesting thing for developers to look at, isn't it? Is there's lots of settings available on the Ad Duplex management interface. Yeah,
it's easy. It takes 5 minutes to sign up, and you can get in there and start looking around, and you can create a new app. Like we were saying, you can have one app for each platform, or one app that's Windows 8 and Windows 8, depending on how you want to run it. And then you can choose whether you want your ads to buy ads for your game, or your ads to get cash. It's up to you.
So again, it's all user configurable. So great demo there. So we've just looked at the ads. Now let's look at how we can package a game and get that game onto both the Windows 8 and Windows Phone stores. So let's go through a few details. Specific information and considerations are, number one, you need to have a name for the app. You can reserve an app name for up to 12 months on the Windows 8 and Windows Phone store. So even if you have an idea today, you can go and register that name and nobody will be able to use it, which is a great opportunity for you as new developers if you've got ideas there. Again, you'll need a publisher ID. The publisher ID is available from the dashboard under My Account section, and that will give you both your publisher ID and your publisher name, and you will need those to add into the Marmalade Hub, and we'll talk about that in a bit. You will need specific icons for the game, so you'll need icons for the tiles, the wide tile, small tile, store logo, and splash screen. So again, think about who you're going to get to do your artwork. You might be great coders, but you might not be great artists. So again, think about who you know, contacts on the internet. If you're a student, speak to the art department. They're looking for portfolio reference material. Again, lots of information on this, so check out the Docs with Marmalade for both Windows 8 and Windows Phone. Lots of information on MSDN, lots of information on both BizSpark and DreamSpark if you're a student or a startup. So looking at the specific things in regard to publishing, for Windows 8, as we said, there's specific details that you need to add. So number one being your publisher display name and your publisher ID, and it is in this CM reference number. You need to copy in the CN equals. Ignore what it says in terms of the formatting string. CN equals is essential. Again, you need to give your identity name. So again, if you click on these little tooltips at the side of each of the forms within Marmalade Hub, it will tell you what is required for that field. Not all these fields are mandatory. The key ones are publisher display name, publisher ID, and the logo sections. So the key thing is about icons and how you want to display your game in the store. This is really important that you create beautiful images, isn't it? We keep stressing this point, but people will buy your app on those three things. What does it look like? What are people saying about it? And what star rating it has? So again, really important. In terms of Windows Phone, very, very similar things, but you will have a different publisher ID. So when you log into dev.windows.com, you'll be given the opportunity of two different dashboards. For Windows 8, choose the Windows Store one. For Windows Phone, choose the Windows Phone one. You will have a publisher ID, which is different on both. Again, you will need the CM equals prefix. So again, ignore what it says there in terms of format. CN equals and then the number. Again, you need to ensure that you use your publisher name and give it a product name which matches the name that you've pre-registered in the store or are using in the store publication. Again, icons are key. You definitely need to have those icons there. So think about those design of images and where you're going to get those images from. One of the big issues developers face is this pixel perfect image size. As we said in Module 1, every single one of these images has to be pixel perfect. If it's 1 pixel out, it will not work and it will fail submission. So what we've got is a great tool, wat/docs.azurewebsites.net. And this is a great tool for those just starting to build new apps in HTML5 and JavaScript. But there's a tool there called the Store Image Generator. And what this literally does is give it an image, So a master image, and it will create you every single image required for both Windows 8 and for Windows Phone. So you have a pixel perfect image of the master image you wanted to use. Again, as we said in Module 1 and earlier in Module 2, you can change those images. Don't worry about the designs. You might have different images for different adverts. But again, think about how you're going to utilize those. But this is a great tool to create those pixel perfect images. Next thing is privacy policy. We keep stressing the fact that, privacy policy is really key. And if you build and host a single privacy policy on a website, that can be used for all your apps and all your different platforms. So again, privacy policy is key and you will require it. So let's talk a bit about publishing your game. So publishing your game is that final hurdle that developers always seem to struggle, especially student developers, they've got lots of games there, but they've never got to that publishing stage.
Yeah.
So let's go through why is it so easy to publish to both the Windows 8 and Windows Phone platform using Marmalade. And we'll go over to James for a demo now.
Okay, so I've got the project that we've been working on, TurboPong, with the ads and everything else integrated, and now we're ready to submit this to the store and make some money for a new laptop of mine that I desperately need. What do we need to do then? Well, there's a few things. We've got it open here. You can see this is red. It's saying it's not ready to deploy.
Not ready to deploy, yeah.
So how do we make it go green? Well, it's quite simple, really. There's a big thing there that says build. Actually, let's click it and see what it says. Let's click on there. Oh, great, right. So we need to build it first. Of course we do, yeah. So let's select build. And what this is going to do is it's going to run a build as you would in Visual Studio. It's going to create it's going to compile all the source codes, all the assets, everything, bring all these resources together. But it's not going to package them up into that final AppX file that you need to go on the store. That's what the next stage is. So this will take a little.
So this is building. It's wrapping that the OpenGLS wrapper with DirectX and everything else. Yeah.
It's taking all the modules you're using, like add duplex, and pulling it all together. And now we're ready to package and validate. So let's click on here and have a quick look. This is also where you can package, install, and run. Package, install, but this time we want to package and validate.
Yep.
And then we click on this button, and as we did before, we will probably get the issue where it will say an invalid ID.
Yeah, so what happens now is it's packaging the app and it's going to run the Windows Application Toolkit, which is the test certification kit. And this is really just going to check if the app passes the store requirements. So this is a great test. This is actually going to fail because we don't have a valid publisher ID in the source code. But if you had a valid publisher name and a publisher ID, it would run through the entire WAC process and then give you a result of is it going to pass, is it going to fail? So immediately you know. So for example, here we've not got images, so we know it's going to fail because it's not got the images.
The publisher ID is missing.
And publisher ID is missing, exactly, yeah. So it's a great tool, but once it's published, it creates an AppX file. So once you've got the AppX file, James, what's the next stage?
So it's, let's open this back up. So we've, it's got checking. So when it's gone green, after we've built it and everything, there's a nice little button there that we click, and then there's our AppX file.
So it creates the AppX file. The little button next to the skull and cross, the skull literally states this is the directory where that file is stored.
Yeah.
And how can we get this onto a device then now?
So you can, if you want to install it on a device that isn't doing it through the store, you can do what's called side loading. I've written an explanation about that in the platform porting guides for Marmalade, which you can get on the Marmalade Documents website.
So that's on marmalade.com, madewithmarmalade.com/Windows, and it's the porting guides on the right-hand side, yeah. And basically there you have to create a temporary store certificate. There's a simple command to do that, and then you use the add app package to add the app package to Windows 8. There's too many adds and apps there. And that will actually sideload using a PowerShell script the app onto your device. You can also actually package and install the device using the Marmalade Hub, can't you, James?
You can do, so you can click package and install here, which will install that on the local machine.
And that will install on your local machine. So again, a great option, again, if you're not sure of PowerShell commands or unsure of what to do, but read the documentation. We've got some great sets of documents there. Again, there's additional Marmalade documents, so look at those.
And there's a little troubleshooting guide because it's quite, some people, there's a lot of ways to trip up when installing certificates and validating it and where do you send it, and there's a nice little helpful list and some screenshots and stuff. So side loading should be easy.
So once you've done the package install and validation, your game is ready to be published. You have your Apex file, you log into dev.windows.com, you go to the publisher section, and you can just literally upload your Apex against your existing registration, and that game's live within 5 days. So the SLA is 5 days, and the game's in store, ready to go.
And for Windows Phone 8, the process is identical, all through the same interface, same buttons, same process. Except I believe side loading's a lot easier. You can just send a ZAP package
So you
to
can
someone
actually,
to test.
so you can send a ZAP package, or you can just install a physical device onto the PC via USB and do a package and install, and it will deploy to the physical device.
Yeah.
So we just saw there a demo of how to publish your games to both Windows 8 and Windows Phone. And let's move on to the next section. So really, we're coming to the end of today's course and module, and we hope you've really enjoyed it. So let's look at some of the additional resources. We've talked about these throughout the day. There's download assets for the Quick Start Labs. So you've got assets for which we've been using all day. We've got dedicated labs as well for a number of different technologies, which include Marmalade. So if you want to go to Ludicious Azure websites, there's a download there for doing a Marmalade Quick Start Lab for Marmalade in C++.
Yeah.
With some source code, so it's a different source code again called Game Jam. We've got the Marmalade GitHub repository, so there's a dedicated GitHub repository for that. There's a definite GitHub repository for the Marmalade MVA course that we've just done, and we'll comment all our code and all our samples, and they'll all be there for the ready of this course. And we've got the Marmalade developer website for Windows, which has the developer offers, special promotions, and all the beautiful docs that James has written. So just as a module review, we've looked at try and buy, ads in games, packaging your game, and publishing your game to the Windows platforms. So this brings us to the end of the course. I've had a great time.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it today. It's been good.
I hope you as the viewers have learned things. You've got to understand what Marmalade is about. You've got to understand a bit more about the Windows platform and the opportunity of Windows. And we wish you every luck in the future building great games for Windows. Automatically for you,
and I don't think there's much of a performance drop at all. So it's not like you're going to lose any frame rate or anything. It's pretty good. So
yes, that's one of the key things about Marmalade, isn't it? In the whole OpenGLES translation, is that it's a middle layer, but the overhead is very, very minimal.
Yeah, I believe it's using the Angle project, which does the actual translations.
Yep. Excellent. Again, you've got physics support with BoxTD. But you've got more physics engines in terms of C++ libraries out there as well.
Chipmunk, I think, is one, and you can even use 3D engines such as Bullet Physics and Newton Dynamics.
So again, it's about taking those resources and tools you already know,
it's a choice, isn't it?
And using the right tool for the right job. So this is the construct of Marmalade in terms of the architecture piece. As James literally said earlier on, it's about the CPU, then sitting on the Marmalade systems with the ability of extensions, and then the middleware that you want to use, and then your application code.
Yeah.
So it gives you that flexibility to be able to expand and grow your service, your game engine as such. Again, it allows you to create some great games, and the big advantage of C and C++ is it's completely open.
Yeah.
So it allows you to use any resource you can find on the web,
Yeah.
any resources that are available in a GitHub repository, so you can really start to grow your games. In terms of the Marmalade C++ stack, one of the big advantages is it's cross-platform.
Yeah.
As you said before, you can build an OpenGLES is supported on the majority of the platforms, but the actual interface to DirectX is very minimal, and it's something as a developer you don't need to be concerned about. No. Again, you've got access to the native platform features. So in terms of Windows, we've got some great access, great features there, which are universal across all devices. So Compass,
you can even do
Accelerometer.
it through C# as well. You don't have to write it to the native platform interaction.
Exactly, and that's one of the big benefits of the Visual Studio integration is you can actually, do cross tool, cross-platform development. Let's start again. So you can do cross-language development. So you can have a solution that has some C# in it, some C++ in it, potentially even some Lua in it, which we touched on day one.
Yeah.
Again, one of the other features is access to the Marmalade out-of-box features such as SQLite. Again, the whole packaging and debugging ability to actually, use a single IDE. It's a great time saver. Again, what's really important is that whole extension, and we've got a dedicated model on the application extensions, haven't we? and we'll go into more detail about how to use the EDK.
Yeah.
And that's a great opportunity for developers.
And that's what I was saying. That's how you can use the C# and interact with the Windows APIs directly.
And we've got some great demos there where we're using third-party services and building like the cloud service solution.
Yeah. And obviously with Visual Studio you can use cool things like Visual Assist. It's one of my favourite tools for accelerating development. So.
And you can use Visual Studio Online, which we'll touch on in a bit. Yeah. So, key things for getting started with Marmalade is you do need a Windows 8.1 license. So if you're a BizSpark customer, completely free. If you're a DreamSpark customer, completely free because all students get access. Again, if you don't have access to Windows 8, you can download the trial edition. You will need Visual Studio, and you will need a Visual Studio for Windows Store. Again, there's a link on the slide deck. And again, go to the resources, so madewithmarmalade.com. Lots and lots of resources and information there. And you can download and install Marmalade completely free.
And I think you made the point that the Windows 8.1 needs to be Pro and 64-bit.
Yes, so Windows 8.1 needs to be Pro, it needs to be 64-bit, and you will need a minimum of 2 gig of memory to run that version. The reasons for that is purely because we have to run the Windows emulator for Windows 8 and the Windows simulator for Windows Phone, and they require Hyper-V, so your machine has to support SLAT. So that's a key point that, if you want to run any of those emulators or simulators, a Hyper-V is required. So in terms of Marmalade and C++ guides,
pretty good ones out there.
There's some great ones out there. So Marmalade have got some really great ones on the doc site. There's lots of third-party ones and lots of guidance in terms of those API details, isn't there? So again, we've got a set of resources there for you to get started, for you to look at what is available. Again, the docs are being updated all the time. And again, think about those community-based projects. So Marmalade have their own GitHub repository. And feel free to get involved in some of those actual Git repositories and create some forks and build some solutions.
Be an open source contributor.
And it looks great for you as developers. Yeah. So let's quickly touch on what's new in Visual Studio 2013. From a game development perspective, there's some really nice new features, and I want to just quickly focus on those. So big things for us has been graphics tooling improvements in Visual Studio. And the big key one for us is really about those graphics diagnostics. If anybody's used Windows Pix in the past, that's now changed with the graphics diagnostic tool. Again, that allows you to debug your graphics, the performance, enhancements, and really see where those performance issues are in the C++ code you're writing. Again, Visual Studio is free if you want the Express version. And again, we've enhanced what is available in the Express edition. So again, think about the opportunity there of using Visual Studio. Another key thing that we're looking at is Visual Studio Online. So Visual Studio Online is a great way of you, as an indie developer or a small studio, allowing all the people in your team to have access to source control, project management documentation, a single build, burn rate, great new features, stakeholder management, where you can actually share your resources with a third party so that they can see or understand where you are as a development team. So again, visualstudio.com is a great resource. Key things I want to call out, it's free for 5 users. It has unlimited team and private groups. So this is an ability for you as a team, and I know you use it, Visual Studio.
Yeah.
It's a great tool to get working. Again, continuous integration. It's got full build services, load testing, and again, MSDN subscribers. So if you're a BizSpark subscriber, you get an MSDN subscription. What we'll do now is we'll step back into the presentation. So again, just to stress those key resources, we've got madewithmarmalade.com, we've got madewithmarmalade.com/Windows, the dedicated Windows section. Again, there's some great documentation on there, which I think you've been involved in, James, in terms of writing porting guides. Yeah. So we have dedicated porting guides for Windows Phone, Windows 8, and for C++. So again, you can get really involved in stepping through these processes. And then you've got the Docs with Marmalade site that James has just shown you, so lots of resources. And again, if you're interested in Visual Studio, head to visualstudio.com, you can download Update 3, and you can also create your online account, which can get started with Visual Studio Online. So as a quick module review, we've done a quick overview of Marmalade. We've talked about the Marmalade Hub configuration and setup. We've talked about deploying a simple application through Visual Studio and what the actual considerations you need to consider. And in the next session, we'll actually deploy our game and talk about how it actually works. And then we've talked about how to access those key resources and help. So we hope you've enjoyed Module 1 and join us for Module 2 later. So welcome back to the MVA, creating your first Marmalade game with C++. So we're on to module 2 now. So in terms of modules, we've done module 1, which was the introduction and overview of Marmalade. Module 2, we're going to be talking about building the gameplay. In module 3, we're going to be talking about cloud services. In module 4, monetization. In module 5, creating Marmalade extensions. And module 6 is packaging and finishing touches. So module 2, building the gameplay. In this module, we're going to really focus upon what is in the game in terms of the code, the different scenes, the different aspects, and more importantly, how you actually can get into building that game if you're new to C++. So in terms of an overview, we're going to be talking about what we're going to be building. We're going to be building a game with Marmalade C++, deploying the game to a device, and then looking at where you can get the source code. So all the source code for today's examples are on the GitHub repository here. So please feel free to download and follow along as we're going through the program. So first of all, welcome to what we're going to be building. So James, give us a bit of background about the game we're going to be building today.
So we're going to be recreating probably the earliest computer game in existence called Pong.
Oh, I remember that on the Atari 2600.
Yeah, I'm not that old.
But, yeah, right.
No, I was a Mega Drive man. But anyway, it's going to be called Turbo Pong because everything's better with turbo in front of it. And we're going to have leaderboards, we're going to have ads, and we're going to have the ability to, turn it from a trial mode into a full game.
So again, looking at the module, we're looking at a lot of the extensions. We're looking at the try and buy. We're looking at ads.
Yeah, so going beyond just the basic gameplay. In this case, the gameplay is sort of very, very simple. Again, it's simple to so we're not detracting from exactly the important concepts that sort of underpin the game and all the extensions.
And again, it's a great framework for anybody to build upon and to add to.
Yeah.
They can change the design of the bats, the balls,
Yeah, sure.
the actual frame of the actual game in terms of the backgrounds, etc. So let's step into a demo then, and let's actually see what we're going to be building today.
Okay, so here it is in all its glory, running in the emulator. It's Turbo Pong in all its sort of form with a nice star field in the background. You can see here we've got some leaderboard information, and there's two little instructions. It says tap here to purchase or tap here to start. I'm not quite sure I like this game, so I'll give it a quick go.
Yeah, let's give it a quick play.
See what we think, shall we?
So in terms of the ads, they're being served by Ad Duplex.
Ad Duplex, yeah. So they're just getting, they're getting sent down. We've registered a bit of code. We've said we want our ads there. We want them to be this big, and they just keep sending them down to us. So
so we're using the standard Marmalade S3E plugin for Ad Duplex.
Yeah, so it's actually
using the extensions.
it comes built in. I think the total number of lines of code is about 30 lines. A couple of functions and some callbacks, and
we'll be showing people how to do that later on, which is great.
Yeah,
so setting up an account, etc.
Yeah.
So again, in terms of the game, 3 lives to the game.
Yeah. So yeah, there we go. But it's running so slow. Obviously, my laptop's quite old. I probably need a new one. If lots of people bought this game, I could get a new laptop. You see, and then we wouldn't all be sat here waiting for me to lose.
So one of the key things then is let's look at the purchase. Let's die and then look at the purchase.
Yeah. Let's buy a copy because I like it. I think
the developer needs some money as well for a new laptop.
For a new laptop, yeah. Okay, so we like that. So let's tap here to purchase and see what it does.
So this is actually doing an emulation again using the S3E billing gateway.
Yeah. So this was a single function call that says buy on the marketplace. And it takes you into here, but it's not available on the market store. This is the kind of placeholder thing that it's showing you.
But it's showing that the emulation is working, and then
yeah. And what it actually does here is it'll update the internal flag saying it's now gone from trial mode to full mode. So when we return back into the game, this is essentially someone's just purchased the game.
all the ads have gone.
And the ad's gone, so I get an ad-free game, which is great.
Excellent.
And the developer can buy a new
And again,
laptop.
in terms of the leaderboard, that's all cloud driven.
Yeah.
So again, as you can see, I'm just slightly losing, so may have to try harder.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, James. So let's step back to the presentation. So we've now just seen a demo of the game, which was really great. So we're going to actually now talk about building that game with Marmalade C++. And we're going to go through all the different aspects involved in doing that. And some of the prerequisites that we definitely need to have as developers is you need a copy of Marmalade, you need a copy of Visual Studio with C++ installed, and you need Windows 8.1 as standard. Again, all those resources are available on the introduction slides, and you can download a free trial of each of those products. Again, in terms of the assets, we've got all those assets available on our GitHub repository. So again, please download them, please look through them. So welcome to day 2 of creating your first game with Marmalade. Today we're going to be talking very much around C++, so we hope you're going to enjoy the course. But here, first of all, let's introduce ourselves.
So my name is James Wintram. I'm director of Lemon Moose Games, which is a company based in the northeast of England. We focus primarily on mobile titles, and I have a lot of experience with Marmalade, Unity 3D, and languages like C++, C#, and Python.
So I'm Lee Stott. I'm a technical evangelist in Microsoft. I'm focused on gaming, cloud and academia in the UK. I've got 4 years of gaming experience, been a technical editor on a number of different publications, and that's my blog address if you want to check out what we've been up to recently. So let's look at the course topics for today. We're talking about C++ and creating your first Marmalade game. We'll start off with an intro and talk about the Marmalade and the overview of what Marmalade is and how it works. We'll then talk about how to build the game and the gameplay. We'll then go in to look at some cloud services, so how you can add cloud services into your game. We'll then talk about monetization. We'll talk about how to create Marmalade extensions, so adding extra functionality and services into your games. And then finish with packaging and finishing touches for building your game specifically for Windows Phone and Windows 8. So let's set some expectations. We're really looking at beginner, intermediate and advanced C++ developers for this session. Anybody who's got any experience of C++, in terms of suggested prerequisites, we're saying, you should have done at least some Marmalade tutorials, you should have some C++ knowledge, and you should definitely be thinking about doing the MVA introduction to C++ and DirectX game development. So please undertake those courses, and we hope you have a great experience on this one. First of all, Microsoft MVA is a great community to join. We've got over 2 million registered users. And again, you can earn points by undertaking these courses. So you can see we've got a dedicated code for this course. So please do use the code and please complete it and get your additional training points. So let's look at what Microsoft and Marmalade's investment in indie game devs out there today. Tell us a bit about...
Yeah, so we've used that as being a small company that fits the criteria. We've taken advantage and we've got loads of really cool software that probably would have cost tens of thousands, if we'd had to pay for it. We've used, the Azure time you get as a BizSpark customer, and it's, really helped us along.
So Microsoft BizSpark is really our startup program for any new startups. The key requirement is that you're under 5 years old and you're under $1 million of turnover. And this is available to any startup across the world. And as James says, you get access to Visual Studio, all our developer tools, including cloud services. So it allows you to get building and using those services to get your business started, because we know software is one of the biggest costs you face. In terms of Marmalade, Marmalade got some specific offers as well. So first of all, you can get started with Marmalade for free. So anybody who isn't a Marmalade user, if you just head to the Marmalade site, you can download Marmalade. And they do have a dedicated Windows site which has all the resources, documentation, tutorials and videos to help you get started to go along with this module. And again, we want you to bring your games to Windows. So we advise you to check often and look at what offers are available on both those sites, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the day. So let's look at Module 1. Module 1 is about an intro and an overview to what Marmalade is. So let's start with looking at what these module overview is. So first of all, we'll talk about what Marmalade is. We'll introduce you to the Marmalade Hub, the configuration and setup. We'll then look at deploying a simple application through Visual Studio and accessing resources and help. So an introduction to the Marmalade Hub. The Marmalade is really a gaming system, isn't it, James? Yeah. So it's a proper IDE gaming service. It's not a graphical user interface.
Yeah, no, there's multiple parts to it. You've got the foundation layer, which is the cross-platform framework, and on top of that, there's other systems that are built, such as Marmalade Quick or the HTML5 stuff, or you can build stuff in C++ that sits directly on top of that platform.
So in terms of developers, the key thing about Marmalade is it's not a graphical design program. It's not like Unity. It's not like GameMaker. It's not like Construct 2. It's a pure IDE. It's an IDE which is you have to literally code either via Visual Studio or via another IDE. Yeah. So big benefits for Visual Studio is it's integrated. So you have the source is easily accessible via the open project. Yeah. And it's a great way to get started. One of the things I need to call out, it's not an image manipulation tool. So it's not like Photoshop or GIMP. You will need to use Photoshop or GIMP to produce those games and that content for your games. So let's look at some of the features and capabilities of Marmalade. As we said, Marmalade is AAA quality.
Yeah.
So, you've got people like Activision,
Yeah.
EA. Can you name any good Activision games out there which have used Marmalade?
You've got the Blur Overdrive, which is available on, I can't remember what platform, same as the Activision Decathlon. So they're pretty high-end 3D games.
And they've all been produced in Marmalade. So again, Marmalade again has its own studio.
Yeah.
And they use a C++ version of Marmalade to produce games directly for Marmalade Studio. Again, programming-wise, you can use C++, you can use Lua, HTML5, JavaScript, and Objective-C. So again, it's about taking those skills you already know and bringing them to the platform. One of the key caveats with Marmalade is OpenGL SES support, and that Windows only supports DirectX. So there is a layer which Marmalade implements to allow the conversion of OpenGL to DirectX. And that's a pretty important thing, isn't it, James, in terms of getting to the Windows platform?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest obstacles, say, if you've got a code base that's written in C++ for iOS or Android, that's going to use OpenGL ES as its graphical API. So converting that to DirectX can often mean, vast amounts of work relative to, how much work went into the game originally. So having that stuff translated
as a minimum. Again, think about how we have two different SKUs. So we have the Intel devices and the AMD devices running x86, and we also have the ARM devices, so like things like the Surface RT. And that's where you need to start considering when you're building in C++ actual binaries for each, actual packages for each of those architectural solutions. So you will have to build for both x86 and for ARM as native solutions. And that's the key thing Marmalade actually offers you, is that ability to build to those platforms very, very simply. Again, what we've been saying about the whole OpenGL, OpenES is don't be too concerned about OpenGL ES to Direct3D to DirectX. Is that Marmalade actually handles all that for you as a developer. It wraps that solution for you. So again, don't feel you have to know too much detail around this. From your perspective, it's about getting to the maximum number of platforms in the shortest time possible using maximum code reuse. So again, look at the opportunity there. So let's look at a quick demo in terms of exploring the Marmalade Hub for C++. So if I switch to my Marmalade Hub, and when I open my Marmalade Hub, I actually have these options. So I've got Marmalade C++, Marmalade Quick for Lua, and Marmalade Web. Today we're going to be focusing purely on C++, and in the previous sessions we've focused on Marmalade Quick for day one. So in C++, again, we have a very similar screen. We have a number of different tutorials that are available. So again, under the tutorials, we can work through building our first Marmalade C++ game, and that's split into 7 tutorials which take you through a whole physics-based game. Again, teaching the basics, so we advise everybody who's new to C++ to undertake that to get a good grounding of what the game is around. Again, we have the opportunity of all the examples. So there's lots and lots of different examples available in the Marmalade Hub, from the tutorials to graphics to specific on games, things on networking, user interfaces. Again, we've got full games here. So a great example is the Karts. So Karts is is actually what it is. It's a kart driving game, but it's all built in C++, and it allows you to go through building the entire game and have a fully working game at the end of it.
You
so
can
again,
see every aspect that's gone into building it and explore. You can see how again the Marmalade guys have used Marmalade to build the game. So.
And again, that comes back to Marmalade being both a middleware framework provider and platform provider, as well as being a studio.
Yeah,
so
because they actually build games.
They're building games and publishing games.
So
So if you check out any of the stores, you'll see games there from Marmalade. Again, if we look at the documentation side, there's so much documentation available, and this is all stored on docs.marmalade.com. Again, fantastic resource. So if you do want to learn about C++ from a very, if you're a beginner all the way through to an advanced, lots and lots of detail here on C++, going all the way into what the libraries are currently in Marmalade, all the way through to, how to add ARM variants and support. So again, never feel afraid of not having enough resources. There's so much documentation and resources available, plus videos, etc. Just absorb the content and use that for the best. So we go back to the presentation. So what we're going to do now is just talk about accessing resources and help. There's various different ways of doing that. So key things are is, from a Marmalade perspective, there's a Marmalade Hub. There's a dedicated website for Windows developers at marmalade.com/Windows. There's a community answers and Marmalade knowledge base. And there's lots of Marmalade documentation. And again, if you're a licensed user, so if you've got anything above an indie license, you also get a support agent. So you can ring up the support teams and actually ask them specific questions around your current game, any APIs that you're having issues with. So again, it's a great support network. So I'm going to pass over to James while he does a demo on accessing resources directly on Marmalade.
Okay, so I've got the Marmalade hub open here, and I'm going to go into the Marmalade C++ section. And you'll see when I've got this open up, you've got all the projects here, you've got a bit of help explaining what you can do. But at the bottom here, slightly hard to see on my monitor, you've got tutorial codes, examples, and help and documentation that will always be available. So if I click on the tutorial code and examples, that'll bring up this list that we saw earlier of all the various things that you can look at and all the projects that are available to check out and see, examples of how specific stuff is done. So if we go back to the Your Marmalade Projects page, we can then click on the Help and Documentation, which will open up a web browser to the docs.madewithmarmalade.com page. And on this page you can see all the description of the help there and all the different topics that are aligned by the technology they've got, such as Quick, Juice, Web, and C++. If we open up the C++ one and the platform one, so we're looking at C++ today. So here's the starting point you probably want to look at if you're going to get into C++. We've got API guides on the side here with a platform abstraction layer, which we've discussed. This is their bottom platform that abstracts all the devices away from you. And then a separate section for all of their middleware. So this is the stuff that is quite Marmalade specific. So, drawing libraries and other kind of graphics libraries that are made available to you. So the platform guides they have include Windows Phone platform guides and Windows Store platform guides. And under these sections, you have everything that you'll need to know when developing the apps and games for the Windows Store and phone. So I suggest you give that a check out and have a read through there and make yourself familiar. One key thing with the Marmalade Hub as well is you'll notice we've got the licensing thing here, and for the hub to actually work you need to be connected to the internet periodically for it to carry out its license checks, and also to access the help, because obviously
all the help's online via
all the
web
help's
resources
online.
now. So thanks. So you can join completely for free with an unlimited number.
So all those tools there are to help you build a better, higher quality product, aren't they? The continuous integration, the load testing means that when you get something out there, it's going to work, well.
It's going to work well. It's going to be tested. You're going to have diagnosed it, and again, as a team, you're working from a single repository. It's not like you're sending USB keys or all acts in a file share on a network.
Yeah.
You've got some code repository, which is a great resource. So this is the Marmalade Hub. The Marmalade Hub, as we said in Module 1, is very simplistic. Again, we've got options for C++, Quick, and Marmalade Web. But today we're going to focus purely on the C++ aspect. And, we expect you to follow along and understand where we're going, which is great. So C++ and Marmalade, why should you think about using C++? What are the big factors?
I think there's a lot of experience in C++, a lot of experienced C++ programmers, a lot of libraries out there that are written in C++. Also, there's if you feel that you want to use something like Marmalade and you think, well, yeah, they're great, that can do our cross-platform stuff, but you're a bit concerned, well, I don't want vendor lock-in, or I might need to move to another platform.
So it's that whole portability.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, OpenGLES, or an OpenGL, very similar, and they're open standards and they work across platforms and stuff. And depending on how you architect your code as well, it should be very easy to, leverage Marmalade's cross-platform layer and sort of build on top of that. But also you can go much further and integrate completely with Marmalade's middleware APIs and stuff and get great performance out of it as well.
So again, it's like third-party libraries, performance. So everything we sort of stated on this deck is the key things, from a developer's perspective. These are the 5 key aspects of being a great game developer, isn't it? You want to get to as many platforms as possible. So, code reuse is key. You want the ability to be able to easily deploy. Mm-hmm. You want the performance. You don't want that overhead of, not knowing how to do DirectX, for example. Yeah. And again, it's about that familiarity. It's using one tool. Yeah. You don't want to learn 8 different tools to do the job. And, today we live in a mobile society. Everybody has mobiles. Everyone has different mobiles. Yeah. Everyone changes their mobile. So, again, you've got to think about producing games for every platform. You have a launch date, and you want to be as many eyeballs as possible. Sure. So if you can use a middleware framework or a tool set, you should be publishing to everything. So let's talk a bit about the loader and the S3E binary system, which Marmalade uses, because that, we touched on it on day one about this is being, the SE3 is the key fundamental of being able to join services or functionality into your games and services.
Yeah, so I mean the S3E layer is the bottom layer in the Marmalade stack, and that's that handles all the interaction with whatever platform you're working on and provides a sort of unified interface for your code to interact with. So the loader system is a piece of code that Marmalade writes, and your game is like a game binary. So in Windows, for example, it leverages DLL files, although they rename them to I can't remember what they renamed them to, but they're DLL files with a different name. And essentially, the Marmalade loader will load that up as a DLL and then run it. But that same mechanism is used on all the other platforms as well. So it's a unified mechanism of a loader and a binary, and that allows it to sort of load your program and keep it isolated
and again, that gives you that portability option because it's loading that loader for every single platform, isn't it? So again, a great resource. Yeah. So let's look at deploying a simple application using Marmalade C++. Key considerations for the Windows platform is around hardware. So number one is as we said earlier, DirectX is supported.
Yeah.
Everything that we do uses Direct 3D.
Yeah.
Again, when you're building with Marmalade, you need to set that to level 9.1 and above. We recommend 9.3 is sort of being the best standard. Again, two big takeaways is the shader model. So look at shader level 2 and a max texture size of 4096. Again, that's just ensuring that the performance is there. And again, if you're thinking about how Marmalade works, is don't get too caught up on the OpenGLES and DirectX issues. Is Marmalade will deal with that. So just don't consider yourself. Don't be too over concerned with trying to understand what Direct is and Direct 3D and OpenGLES, etc. So let's just look at the device resolutions for Windows Phone. So Windows Phone really comes in 4 different variants. We have the 480 by 800, so the WVGA. We have the 768 by 1280, which is the WXGA. And then we have the new HD devices, so the 720p and the 1080p. Again, what's really interesting about this in C++ is you can query the devices to see what actual resolution they are, so what the end user has. And more importantly, then provide content that is most appropriate to their device. So that's a great feature for game developers, isn't it, today? So let's look at what the actual memory allocations are. So Windows Phone comes in really 2 variants. It comes in a low spec device, which are our most popular devices, and that's really because of cost. So for example, in the UK you can buy a Windows Phone for around £30. In the US around $60 now for a Windows Phone. So they are our high volume sellers. And they're 512 meg of memory. So again, thinking about when you are building your games, performance and optimization, and the great updates that are now provided in Visual Studio Update 3 really allow you to get the best performance out of your games.
And the advantage of C++ is you are going to be writing, or you do have the ability to write very high performance code, which will run very nicely on the lower end devices.
And that's one of the big benefits of that native development environment, isn't it? You are writing native code as such.
Sure.
So you can get the maximum performance out of the tin that you're writing to. So let's look at some of the deployment considerations then for building for Windows 8 and 8.1. Graphics are key. We are running on PC devices, so again we expect you to be building to that, to the DirectX level of 9.1.